Hello, everybody, and welcome to episode number 76 of the VonDubCast. If you don't know why I'm laughing already, it's because I've already restarted this podcast a couple times because I'm an absolute goofball and I make myself laugh. And I think it's funny to me, and I don't think it'll be funny to many of you. I'm sure some of you would find it entertaining. But anyways, how are you guys doing? I'm doing well. Got another great episode for you guys. I'm curious what you guys thought of Monday's episode, the year wrap up, kind of taking you guys through these stories of what went into the recording of all 75 episodes that are released in the first year, and also just giving you guys a heads up on the 5 or 6 that I had recorded in the first year but haven't released, ones like this episode today with Sora. I'm curious what you guys thought about that, but I wanted to make sure, maybe if it's not up your alley, that I'd release some traditional episodes this week. So releasing this one with Sora today, and then maybe even another one on Friday. We'll see what happens the rest of the week. It's a busy one. I've been recording a lot and just kind of trying to release a lot, but not putting too much on my plate. So today's episode was another one. I know I've done one with Ethan Rubin before. He was with the Peterson Pals group, and I've done a couple others since then. This is one of those with Sora. Sora's from the UK. She has an amazing voice. I'm sure you guys, as soon as it starts, it's just very hypnotic and beautiful. And this is one of those episodes where there was no real theme, no rhyme or reason. I didn't really have much for questions going into it, but as with lots of these episodes that are from this Peterson Pals group, there's a certain shared knowledge base or something that we can kind of tap into. And I would say that most of our conversation kind of revolved around that, in and out, and, a little bit of us handing it off where our expertise laid. And maybe I would take 10 minutes where I really knew a lot about the subject matter, and then she would school me in something. And it was really awesome. Back and forth, really productive. I think we talked about a lot of important and deep topics today that I think you guys will enjoy. And to be completely honest with you guys, probably 10 minutes after I record these episodes, I forget 90% of what I said. I usually remember more of kind of what the guest says than what I said. I just kind of forget about it. And I get, my girlfriend and my sister to listen to these episodes, and they kind of give me a little bit of a breakdown on it. But it makes it a little fun when a couple of weeks have gone by and I'm trying to do the intro and remember exactly what we talked about on them. But what I do remember every time is what an episode made me feel like, which sounds kind of cheesy and bullshit, but for how quickly I forget what specifically was said on a podcast, I still remember what I thought of the podcast and it's almost the feeling I get when I hit end and I stand up from it, what we covered. And I know from that moment in that 5 to 10 minutes after the podcast, that sticks with me. And I remember, and this is a positive one, right? Like this, and most of them are. It's very rare do I stand up from a podcast and go, maybe that wasn't it, right? Don't get me wrong, it happens, and it sucks ass when it happens, especially if you don't have another one booked for a week or so and you have to kind of sit in it. It's not very fun, but it happens rarely, and this was not one of those. And I just kind of, I don't know where my mind brought me to that, but I just wanted to kind of let you in a little bit on my process. So I may not have all the details of every story and every topic we cover in this discussion, but I really had a great time getting to know Sora, and I feel like even some of the topics we got into after the podcast and our discussions since have been even better, which always just shows me that I need to have a guest on again. So I'm sure you'll be hearing more from Sora in the future on whatever we talked about, and probably a lot of other things since then. So I hope you guys enjoy it. I know for so many of these intros, I was sitting here promising the YouTube channel would be getting caught up. And as you guys have probably seen on the social media channels, we've been getting up, a couple episodes a week, and it's really moving forward. There's new episodes to check out. There's some videos, some don't. A subscription to the YouTube channel goes a long way. Leaving a like on that, comments, they mean a lot on YouTube, getting that fired up. If you could go there, the social media channels, sharing a post every now and then, passing it with your friends. Like I say, every week, that's how these podcasts spread. If you guys can do that for me, that'd be a huge, huge thing. Other than that, I hope you guys are having a great time. This has been kind of a interesting time. Things are opening up again, at least in Alberta where I live. Hopefully it's the same wherever you're listening to this from. It's interesting for me to have been saying so many things on this podcast for so many months about the lab theory and how this has been handled, and some of the restrictions and some of the ridiculous that we're seeing from our governments. And it's an odd feeling now to be vindicated in so many of them and be proved right, and also very frustrating to see how little of a change that makes, and how not even speaking for myself, but the people that I've been listening to that have been leading me on the right direction have just been 100% right time after time and put their neck out and taken a lot of pain for it. It's interesting to see how that swings around once some of the other people that have been, swinging the hammer of silencing and canceling on people come around to these ideas themselves and just pretend like nothing happened. It's been pretty interesting. But you know what? That just shows me that I'm on the right path and that this information I'm trying to spread, it has some importance and there's still a lot of work to do to bring it to people that need it. So I'm going to keep doing that. If you guys enjoy it, you keep listening. Other than that, I will see you guys in the outro of this episode and possibly even on another episode this week. All right. See you guys. Thank you so much for being here, Sora. It's a big honor. You're, I think, the second or third guest from the Peterson Pals group that has joined me on the podcast. It's been really interesting conversations so far. And I might be wrong on this, but you might be our first our first guest from the UK.
Representing.
Yeah. How's your day so far?
So far, so good.
So far, so good. Yeah, I've been excited all day to do this. I bet it's been number one thing on your list all weekend.
A little nerve-wracking, totally. New kind of concept for me, but it's not a new concept. I know what podcasting is, but to be on someone else's podcast, someone else's show, definitely new. But I'm really excited about this, and I really thank you for the opportunity.
Oh, anytime. I feel like every time somebody says thank you to me, I just kind of shake my head because I selfishly enjoy this so much. It's almost not like you shouldn't be thanking me. I should be thanking you for, this is another. You're giving me an opportunity to do my favorite thing in the world. So, it's an honor to have you on. So growing up, did you grow up in the UK your whole life? Is that kind of the only thing you know?
Yeah, well, I know London pretty well because that's where I grew up.
Right.
But I also have quite a lot of family in the States and a lot of family in Israel. So I kind of know all those countries or well, not countries because they're quite large, but all those areas that that my family are in. Pretty well. So I was visiting the States, twice a year, sometimes 3 times a year since I'm really young.
Oh, wow.
And probably the same.
Wow. And I find that's traveling is just something that pays dividends so far down the road in everybody's lives. The more you get to travel at younger ages, and it's obviously something that you're very privileged to experience. And some people don't get that. And that's unfortunate. But for those people that can take advantage of something like that, it just really shapes you for the rest of your life to be able to see different points of views. And even I find interesting is people don't understand so much about the rest of the world. Like for myself growing up, until I traveled to London and to the rest of the UK, you don't realize just how for such a small patch of land, how many different places and different people like within that. It's almost like the diversity that you have in all of Canada and, British Columbia to Nova Scotia, to Alberta, to all these different things, you have that still, but just in this really tight knit area where I think for somebody like myself, when I was growing up, you just kind of, you think of the accent and, the taxi cabs and that kind of thing. And you just think that is the whole thing, but there's so much diversity within it. It's kind of interesting. Do you think that's one of the biggest things that shocks people when they come to visit, or do you think it's something else?
So, yeah, I think usually when people come visit, they have quite a grand idea of what London is.
Yeah.
I think that's with everything that you don't know, you fantasize about. So I think when they come, they're like, "Oh, we're so excited to go to see the changing of the guards," and it's a great experience because it is. If you've never seen it before, it is really cool.
Yeah.
But for someone living here, I think lots of people will relate to this. It's like not that cool if you're living here. I barely go visit Big Ben, and I have worked in central London, so pre-COVID I was quite close to the palace, and I did go for walks there, but it was all very normal to me. And I think that's what's interesting about traveling is you're going into someone else's normal, but it's so abnormal for you, so it's so exciting. And the kind of, and then do you know what's funny is then you think, oh, it must be better in this place, or oh, I've had such a good time here, it must be kind of nicer here. But then what people don't realize is that say they moved there and then stayed there, it would become their normal, and then it wouldn't be as fun and exciting as it was when they went there for the first time. So
for sure,
just kind of little thing there that I think about sometimes.
Yeah. And I think also another piece of it too is it's the time frame that you get to work with. So if you go to London for 2 weeks and it's all so novel and so new to you that you get to experience all these things, like you said. And I think what you're focused on so much there is the differences. But then if you spend that 2 weeks to 4 weeks or maybe 2 months, you now get to get past all those differences and you start to see the similarities again. And then you get to see that, oh, we're all so alike and we're all struggling with so much of the same issues. It just, some of those differences pop out to you and are so jarring that you miss out on the similarities that are there. And I feel like that's what's important about traveling, is to find all, you get to go to all these different places and see these huge jarring differences, but then to understand that in all these places with all these huge jarring differences and vastly different ideologies and ways that lenses that they look through the world of, really we're all very similar at the end of the day, right? Like it's probably 90% we're all the same, and then that 10% is huge and we're hugely diverse and everybody knows that, but you still need to keep that in your head. And I feel like this is what traveling does for people, is that huge difference of just, seems like you would never be able to understand this in 100 years. That's 10%. Really 90% we're all the same. And I feel like it's unfortunate when people don't understand that and don't get that experience of travel. They kind of walk through their whole life just thinking that they're that one lens that they've seen is everything, and that's how the world works. It's I think the source of a lot of troubles. And I've on this podcast before tried to come up with some ways of like mandating travel throughout the school system in some first world countries to like force kids to go abroad and to have like exchange programs. But I don't know. I think it's just we're not there yet. But I just think the benefit of it would be huge.
Yeah. Well, I love how you said about how we're all kind of different but all the same.
Yeah.
And that kind of there were actually 2 points I wanted to pick up
Mhm.
on, but I'll start with that one because it's so interesting how really it's so true when you meet someone, when you're open to them, and when you just meet them on a human level, and you don't meet them on like an intellectual level, you don't meet them on like a compatible level, or any level that requires any sort of like um kind of anything more than just being human.
Mhm.
And I find that I connect with people like that really easily, just purely on the basis that I know kind of that we're both quite connected already, just by the fact that we're both human.
Mhm.
And I love that idea of everyone being so different on the outside, but so the same. And it always puzzles me. And this is something I brought up on the group actually. It always puzzles me why the issues in the world are so complicated, so complex, so vast, so just deep rooted in history and
Mhm.
in that go generations back. But the solution sometimes seems so simple, but it gets overcomplicated by a lot of I don't know what it is, and that's why it puzzles me, because it's like I don't understand how you could go to war, how people could be killing each other, why that would happen. And it sounds naive because, and it is naive. I appreciate that it is coming from a place of naivety, but at
Mhm.
the same time, I genuinely believe that it doesn't make sense that this isn't kind of. I don't understand how things from a micro to a macro level
Mhm.
look so vastly different. I mean, you and I can have a conversation with
Yeah.
from completely different places. I actually don't know where you're from, but it could be. Is it Canada?
Yeah.
Okay, cool. Well, it's a bad example, but say I because I don't think England and Canada have ever been at war, but I'm saying with Americans, for example, I meet an
Mhm.
American and I get on with them so well on a personal level, but then you think, 200, 300 years ago, my great 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 grandfather and your great great were literally on the battlefield murdering each other. So, like,
Mhm.
how did that happen? How does that go from a micro? I just don't. It just blows my mind.
Yeah. And I feel like I felt very much the same for many years. With just like, how can we not figure this out? Like it seems so obvious to people. And I feel like that was a little bit of my own naivete of growing up and not understanding the real underpinnings and under mechanics of how the world works. And I feel like as I get older and start to see all those, you start to see exactly why these things happen. And so much of it is not. I feel like it's easy to blame bad people and evil in the world on that sort of thing, when really it's just incentives, and it's the natural. I mean, Jordan Peterson is one of the biggest proponents of this, but it's just that natural proponents that we have within ourselves, that part of our human nature that allowed us to be successful evolutionarily. Greed, looking out for yourself, looking out for your tribe, being able to rationalize and demonize other people to be able to move yourself forward. And then you extrapolate that out onto the grand stage of the world, and you see where these things that seem so simple, just treat people with this, we can all still get ours, but just we can do that while treating people with this unified modicum of respect and treating that 90% that's within us all, that human nature, that humanity, with that certain level of respect. And it's easy to see how that can fall off in all this. And it's just about, on an individual level, like you said, when you get in front of someone, it's so easy to bring it back to this of just our connection. We're humans. We know that we are much more similar than we are different. But once you get another level past that tribalness, and those the darker parts of the human spirit can take hold and start to extrapolate, and then you see entire structures built upon that, right? And then you start to see, industries and all this stuff built upon those things. And it's just about, I don't know, what I do and what I try to tell people on this podcast is just, there's nothing you can do about that, because I, for a long time, got so frustrated. Once I started to see that, you just get so frustrated. It's like, how is everybody else not seeing this? It can be changed so easily. We just need to change our mindset that little bit to, emphasize the similarities over the differences, and we can really make some change. And I think what I realize is you'll run yourself crazy trying to fix all that yourself, and you can just concentrate on what you do. And as long as you are living with those values that propagate the good things and the better parts of our humanities, and you are setting your aim correctly and just lead by example, that's what brings everybody in. And it's way much better. Just, it's, again, it's funny enough, it comes back to Jordan Peterson, but just, clean your own room, focus on your own things, what you can do, and show people those better values, show what's better to aim at. It's not all about money and getting up as much resources as you can. It's about more than that. And if you always keep that as your rudder and your moral compass, people will see that and feed off that, and you'll start to propagate more of that into the world. And that's all any of us can do, is just try and be our little part to bring more of the positive aspects of human nature and not as much of the bad. And I feel like so much of what propagates it forward is people not being okay, even bringing out, admitting that they have that bad part of themselves that is so innately part of our human nature and is what allowed us to get to this point. But some people are too scared to even admit that that's part of them. And it's, I think that's what really sends us on to some bad paths sometimes.
Yeah, that really kind of resonated, especially when you said you could get really lost. Just wondering about the whole kind of how all the mechanics of how people and how societies and how structures work, and really bringing it back to ourselves in our own lives and trying to make the best decisions for ourselves. Cleaning up our own room, like you say, is definitely kind of the best way to do life, I guess.
Yeah.
And then the only caveat I'd put on that is if you've happened to find yourself in a position where, so someone like Jordan Peterson, who has a big following, or he, and I think people get there purely on luck. I genuinely do believe that it's a responsibility to be in that position. So, and I think people who view it as a responsibility often do better than people who just, take it as a kind of like, well, I got lucky, so now I can use this all for myself. And but yeah, so just going back to, if someone does find themselves in a position like that, then I think it is their responsibility to be looking at broader issues, and they can clean up their room, but now they also have a million other people who are following them who they can help and push forward some good ideas. And that's why I think someone like Jordan Peterson has, although he seems kind of crushed under the responsibility in some situations, I really admire how he's gone about using his influence to just further good ideas.
Yes. And I feel like so much of that, again, I feel like we both say something, there's so much we want to unpack out of it. I really love what you said about the responsibility of that and how you get there. I think, just to push back on that a little bit, I agree that luck, you can't discount luck, and luck always comes in there, but luck comes to the hardworking. And I feel like someone like Jordan Peterson, who, it was kind of lucky how everything shook out and where he stood up and what he stood up against. And me being Canadian was very much more, on the forefront for us when we got to see it, because it was a bill that was being passed, in our backyard that was really going to affect us. And you got to see it, but he was doing so much work for years and years and writing maps of meaning and all that work. He was trying to figure these problems out for, decades before it ever really came to a head where he, was handed that responsibility, right? But he put in all that work and he earned that. And I feel like that's what makes him so good with that responsibility and has him act in such a beautiful manner. I think, which is what we see is that's exactly what we would hope we would see out of somebody in that position with that kind of voice and reach, that they're just doing trying to propagate the best ideas and working on themselves and admitting to their mistakes when they're not, hitting those values. I feel like that is so important because we see how easy it is to fall into that pitfall of there's easy ways to grow that reach, right? I think we see it. I'm trying to think of an example and not pissing anybody off. And are you familiar with Zuby? He's actually from the UK. Zuby Music at all? No. And he's this artist. He does rapping. He's all over Twitter. He's very much pushing back against kind of the wokeism stuff, right? And he very much has a platform and has earned it. And he's worked really hard and got there. But you see the pitfalls of him is. And I really enjoy him. I don't want this to be a bash on him, but I just think you see where he has understood the formula of what will get him views, what will get him these things, right? And he puts forward, he matches that with the message he wants to send. But then from time to time, you'll see him do ones where it is not purely for the message that needs to be sent. There's also a little bit of a wink and a little bit of a fuck you to the other side that will, he knows, create tension and create, back and forth and really up his profile. But you never see somebody like Jordan Peterson doing anything like that. I think there's certain people that really are the gold standard of what people should be when they get a platform. And for someone like myself that is trying to build a platform, that is who I'm idolizing. People like Jordan Peterson, like Joe Rogan, like Lex Friedman, that really take a responsibility and understand that they have a voice and are open to apologizing, but only not when it's called to be apologized for, when they feel it, right? And to always be trying to chase and bring that positive side out and to bring those good ideas forward and to fight against the bad ones. And sometimes to do that live in front of thousands, millions of people, right? As you're trying to think of, that's one of my favorite things of watching Jordan Peterson, is to see him have an idea in the moment, have it challenge, and to see the wheels turn and him figure it out in that moment. And for people to get to watch that, give him the space to understand, oh, this is the first time he's thinking of it, and just try his best to show his framework of thinking to help arm other people with that same framework so that they can test ideas in their own life. And I just feel like that you are so right on what a responsibility that is. And I feel like there's so many trappings and it's so easy to fall off that responsibility and not hold yourself to that really high tier. But if you can do that, and like you say, it's crushing and that's a hard tightrope to walk, I think the results speak for themselves with, any of those people I named, Joe Rogan, Jordan Peterson, Lex Friedman, the people that I think really show the high bar of what that can be. The results speak for themselves. They have people, just floods of people saying, hey, you changed my life. You saved me. You did all these things. Because I feel like it's a really hard thing to do. And it's very admirable for someone like Jordan Peterson. And we can see some of the negative results of it. But the payoffs, if you can achieve that, is astronomical. And I feel like it doesn't get enough credit. And that's what pains me so much when I see them attack guys like that in the media and clickbait and all this stuff to try and go after them and change the perception of them, because they're doing such a noble and great task with what burden they're taking upon themselves. Sorry, I'll let you talk at some point here. I just got on my soapbox there.
No, it was so interesting to listen, because I like just going back to the beginning of what you said about working hard. And I think that there is absolutely, it's definitely a mix of the two.
Mm-hmm.
And what I kind of think it is, it's kind of what I mean by luck is that part is out of your control.
Mm-hmm.
That's really what I mean. You've got to put in 100% of what's in your control. So whatever you're trying to be successful at, 100% of what's in your control and working really, really hard.
Mm-hmm.
But the bit that's out of your control is whether it will actually go through or not.
Right.
That's what I really meant by luck.
I gotcha.
The other thing I wanted to talk to was something you said about traveling earlier, but you said that you really wanted to make it part of a compulsory part of the education system, that compulsory for people to go out and travel and see the different ways that other people live, so that they realize that however they were brought up, or whatever limitations they've put on themselves through the society that they've been exposed to and the very limited amount of people that they've come in contact with, suddenly breaks away because they see, oh my goodness, I don't have to do it that way. Wow, that's kind of cool. Like, oh wow, I don't have to. And that freedom in that is something that I think is a mindset change, but can be really, kind of perpetuated by meeting people and exploring other cultures, and that's definitely one of the best ways to get there. But I also think it's like, you don't have to do that to get that. You can also just understand that there's infinite possibilities, infinite choices. The world is like the world is your oyster. It's so vast and so many possibilities, and there is no one way. And whatever you think about how you're supposed to live, whatever rules you've created, I think that you don't feel 100% comfortable with, you can always let them go at any point, and you can always change and do whatever you want tomorrow, in the next minute, you can, change. And I think that there's so much freedom in that. And of course, there's so much anxiety around that too. But I think meeting other people and realizing the support system that you can get, no matter what your beliefs, no matter what your thinking is really exciting, I think.
Yeah, for sure. I love what you said about limitations there, because I think that is something that people don't realize. I didn't just to say people, myself, I didn't realize how powerful limitations were, and self-set limitations, right? Just like something so simple as I'm shy. If you're told that growing up, oh, you're shy, right? You bring that upon yourself, you put that limitation, and now that's it's just words, but that is part of you. Now you've taken that on, but really you don't realize that holds no power over you. Those limitations are self-imposed. If you tell yourself, no, I'm not shy, you can change that, right? And I feel like that is such a unlocking of your potential when you can realize that. And I feel like travel can teach you that. I feel like somebody like Jordan Peterson, or somebody that's really sending that message out of that, like telling you that those limitations are self-imposed and trying to unlock your full potential in other ways, can really bring that forward. But I just feel like it's so powerful, but it's also so scary, because now that you realize that all those limitations that you feel upon yourself are all self-imposed, it really opens the door to all these things you're not chasing and you're not experiencing that you could be doing, right? And I feel like that is so scary to some people. They don't want to realize that these limitations, they would rather live in a world where those limitations are imposed upon them, because now there's nothing they can do. Now it's, like when we talk about luck, right? Like it's easier to keep it in that category of luck, and to keep it in that category, right? And to not work hard to find the accountability that you can bring it to. Whereas when you were describing your description of kind of, or clarifying what you were saying on luck, it almost seemed like you could interuse faith for luck in that conversation at a certain point. Like it's almost, you need to work so hard and just have faith that those things that are out of your control, like the luck component, whatever word you want to use for it, you have to have faith that that is going to come forward, right? And I feel like faith is one of those words that is tough, because it got so demonized for so many years, and then just kind of just was almost a laughing stock for a while. Just religion and faith is possible, and not even saying religion, but just the concept of faith in anything that you can't prove and trust has been so kicked in the dirt that now it's hard to bring up. But I think it is such a powerful concept of just how powerful it is to have faith. And I feel like that doesn't need to be religious. That doesn't need to be anything. It's just, having faith that you are a good person, that things are going to work out. If you work hard and put everything forward, things will, what do you want to call it? Manifestation, or, the gift, or whatever that book was, like there's so many names for these things, but it's all true. And there's reasons they've lasted thousands of years, these ideas of faith and luck and all this kind of stuff, because they're useful, and they have some real deep truth to them that we don't totally understand yet. That's almost the basis of what faith is. It's just, it's almost truth that we just don't understand yet, but you can feel. And it's one of those things where I feel like that is tough to teach and touch to get, unless somebody can experience it themselves, or somebody can tell their own story of faith clear enough and well enough to let people in to that experience. It's really hard for them to understand it. It's one of those ones where you can talk about it all day, but until somebody really experiences it, either through really good storytelling or experience it themselves, it's hard for them to see it. And it's that's one of those things I wonder about, is how can we get better at teaching those types of lessons that are so important but so hard to make stick. You know what I mean? Like they're hard to inject people with. You can just so easily brushed off. I don't know.
Yeah. I wanted to pick up on something you said about success, about getting what you wanted and the results, working hard and getting results. And this is where I'm up to, and with that sort of kind of thinking. And, it's always open to change, but I think this makes sense and resonates with me in this moment in time. And that is that kind of, what is success? I kind of view success as not having that platform. It's like, you're not successful when you get the platform. You're not successful when you make loads of money. You're not successful when you become famous. It's like the success is just being happy and being in sync with yourself. And I think if you can go through life being in sync with making every choice that you want to make because you want to make that choice, because it's you, then that gives you that feeling of satisfaction and in sync with yourself, and you're living successfully then. You are living successfully. Now, if that happens to come with loads of money at the end of it, or loads of fame at the end of it, that's like a really nice bonus. It's like, okay, cool. But that's not the point of it. And I was reading this book by Phil Knight, who's the the founder of Nike shoes. Is that
yeah, Nike, yeah.
Nike. So like the tick thing, the swoosh.
Yeah.
Okay, so he wrote this book, and what he kept going back to, and this was so interesting from a very business-minded, wouldn't say super intellectual, but just a very business-minded, very hardcore type person. He always went back to a calling. He said he followed a calling throughout his entire life. He followed a calling. And I think if people just listened to inside their heads, or to just inside their hearts, I think there'd be so much more satisfaction and so much more contentment with life.
Oh, I get goosebumps just listening to that, because it's so exactly what I feel. I feel like so much when you ask what success is, right? I feel like everybody has their own idea of it, but I feel like it's one of those things where it's scary to try and determine what your own success is. So it's easier just to take on what the world says success is, right? Instead of trying to find your own. So what you're doing is just, it's money, it's fame, all those things, right? What is society telling me that I need to get to? But for me, and this is, again, not my idea, this is picking up from so many of these amazing intellects, but it's about how well are you matching your true core values of what you deem to be good in your heart, right? And I feel like for thousands and thousands of years, that was religion for people. And that was what was giving them these guideposts and these value systems to now check yourself against. But as, we just talked about, that gotten so beaten down that people are now forced to put their own value system together of what makes them. And I feel like so many people are so unhappy because they don't even have a clear idea of what those beliefs are and what those values are. They're just picking and choosing what society's telling them. Oh, money. Okay, I'm going to chase this. Man, I chased some money and it hasn't really brought me that happiness. Okay, I'm going to chase. Oh, maybe it's fame. Maybe I was just missing it. And but you're not listening to your own thing, right? And I love what you said there, because this is something that I really found was my mind goes a million miles a minute. I really struggle with slowing it down. But I love that about myself. And I've always loved that about myself. And I feel like that's one of my biggest strengths. But I found also it's hard to listen to yourself unless you have some quiet, especially because today with, social media and your phone and all this stuff, there's always something coming in that you don't have very much time with yourself. And when you look at human beings, the last couple hundred years have been so different than the thousands and thousands of years of what we're biologically based for. And we used to have a lot of time, sitting around the campfire, thinking, being quiet with ourselves, just being in the moment, and to see what makes me happy. What, is it, just time around the fire with my, my cave mates. I don't know. I'm trying to throw it back to that mindset of whatever that is, but you get to really have that time. Whereas now, unless you're, like that's what I found with meditation, when I'd find that forcing myself to quiet my mind and bring myself back, I was able to really unlock the things that I believe in and my value system. And I've been able to really, over the past year, really narrow down what I believe in, what I value, where, and to throw away pieces of, no, that's just society telling me I have to value that. I don't care about that. I don't care about this, like really, truly, and just narrowing that down to what I have, and then trying to find something like this where I can help fine tune those, because I have an idea. I think I might be overstating how nailed down I have this. I have a very rough framework of what I think my value system are. And then I come on this podcast and I talk about it and I solidify and codify exactly what those things are. And then I can try to live to them. And by doing it on a public forum like this, I'm also adding accountability. If I'm saying this is what I truly deeply value is these things, now I have to stick to them, because now people have heard me say that. Now, it forces that. And I feel like every day that goes by, the closer I'm getting to following those value systems, the more success and happiness that I feel is, I am on the right track. Not because society, right? It's not a bunch of money or a bunch of fame that's telling me this. It's just, no, that internal feeling of, I am on the right course and I'm moving in the right direction here. Right. And technically it's a funny feeling because I feel like everybody else is telling me you're going the wrong way. You have this amazing job that anybody would kill to have at 27 years old. Like, what are you doing? Like you're getting away from this. That's where all the money is. That's where the success is. And I'm backing away from that into this other thing that is not bringing any money. It's costing money and all this stuff. And I'm feeling, no, I'm on the right path. This feels good. This feels right. And everybody else around me is like, you're doing the wrong thing. And it's just such a funny feeling. And I think that also is another piece of the puzzle too, is how hard it is for somebody like Jordan Peterson to do that for his whole career and to not to be tried to what's not sell out, but like try to change that vision and sell yourself short on some of those values throughout your whole career, and to hold himself to that, to the point, right? And he didn't have all those, traditional things to tell him he was on the right path. He was on that path and was stuck to it. And eventually it broke and he got all this fame and all this and all the other stuff that come with it. But that only came because he forcibly every day refused to break to the forces that be and to follow his path and his fire and his curiosity. And I feel like that is so admirable to me. That is that value system that I look up to and that I want to bring onto myself. It's going to be my own version of that, but I want to do that in my own way. I want to do it what those guys did and not compromising at all. Just finding who you are and not compromising, only compromising when you really have to, but never on the things that are deeply true to yourself. And that's kind of my goal, my whole thing. And people always ask me, what's a podcast about? And I'm like, do you got 15 minutes for me to say that exact thing I just said? Because that's what it's about. But it's, you can't tell somebody in 30 seconds that, you almost need a half hour just to explain all that and caveat it with everything. So it's quite the journey,
It is. It's totally a journey. But what I was thinking, as you were saying, I think we can boil this down to I'm borrowing this phrase from I heard it from someone that I was listening to,
mm-hmm.
and they just said, introduce yourself to yourself.
Mm.
Take the time to get to know who you are and what you like and what you want. And it took me so long to appreciate that. I mean, I'm 23 and I probably started only, a couple of years ago, just really, and I still haven't got, really understand everything about myself, but there's so much confidence and so much at ease that comes with introducing yourself to yourself. And yes. I feel like that's exactly what we're talking about here.
Mm-hmm. For sure. And I feel like that's also kind of what, if you take, Jordan Peterson's last two books as a whole, like the 24 rules, and you try and get the spirit of them, I feel like that is a little bit of what that spirit is, of all those rules taken together, is kind of stop bullshitting yourself, just sit down and get to know yourself, right? Find those things like, you're an angry person. Like me, one of my biggest things is my anger. I really struggle with it. So I'm working on that. Where does that come from? When I find myself in a really angry moment, like, what am I angry about? What is triggering this? Like, trying to take myself back, and the how much that helps me in these areas. And I didn't realize that. I always just thought, I feel like you need people like Jordan Peterson or people in that kind of vein that are so much further down the road than you to say, these things have value, right? Like sitting with yourself and getting to know yourself and peeling away the bullshit, blowing away the fog, maybe is a better way to put it. When Jordan Peterson talks about hiding things in the fog, blowing that fog away is such an important piece. But I feel like for myself, I always struggled with school unless I could really, really understand if it interested me, or if I could see it being useful. If I could see the utility of this knowledge, I would do awesome in school and I would get great marks. If you couldn't prove that to me, I was doing the bare minimum. I had strict parents, so I made sure I kept my grades up. But I'm going to just, copy or do whatever I have to do to make sure I'm just getting enough of it. And I feel like that's so many people. I feel like that's got to be more common than, it can't just be me feeling that. And I feel like I take that mindset forward into lots of these really big ideas, because something like that of what you said, I can't remember exactly the frame, but take time to get to know yourself, to introduce yourself to yourself. That is so important. But for people to really let it sink in, you also need to attach the utility to it and show them, hey, this is it. I'm telling you this is important, but here's some ways and some real tangible things that I've gotten out of this to prove to you that's important. Because I feel like that's what changed me. Yeah.
Oh, sorry.
No, go for it. Go for it.
Yeah, just because I was going to say, and just I can give an example
Yeah, for sure.
of a way that it was so useful, because it also comes down to kind of owning, because you know how you said, that you struggle with anger.
Yeah.
And I think that there are lots of things that I don't want to admit myself that I struggle with, because it's a big deal in my head. It's like, oh, it's a big deal. It's like you judge it. You're like, oh, no, you're a weird person if you do that. Or,
Yeah.
oh, no, you're not a good person if you
Mm.
have that. So let's, like you say, keep it in the fog. But the kind of thing that I would add is, it's interesting. The minute you say, you know what, yeah, I guess I'm an insecure person, or I guess I'm jealous. I see someone and they have something nice and I'm jealous, and that's not really nice, but that's where I am right now and that's where I'm at. And you don't then have to change it in that second. You don't have to overcome it. It's just even just sinking into that,
Yeah.
and being like, okay, fine. It just becomes less of a big deal. And then when you tell someone, that's even more cool, because you tell someone, and even I've told, and I don't recommend this, but I've kind of told somebody, yeah, I was really jealous of you, or I am really jealous of you. But what's funny is it's really not a big deal to them either.
Yeah.
Usually, they're just like, oh, okay,
Yeah.
like, yeah, well, thanks for telling me. So my sister's a great example. I sometimes tell her things, and I think they're a massive deal in my head. I'm like, oh my goodness, I said something so stupid. They think I'm an absolute idiot. And then I tell her, and she's like, oh, what are you even talking about? Because everyone has different ideas of what's good, what's bad, what's stupid, and I just think things aren't as big a deal as like we think they are. And when we introduce ourselves to ourselves, and when we do have that conversation with ourselves and are comfortable with warts and all, who we are, then things become less of a big deal to us.
For sure. For sure. And I'm so glad you had a tangible example to give, because that's exactly what I was going to say, was what it took for me with lots of these ideas and lots of these things I've been implementing over the last 3, 4, I don't know, probably like 6 or 7 years, actually, since I found podcasting. This is what kind of brought all these ideas to me and introduced me to people like Jordan Peterson and Lex and all these guys that have really changed me. But what I found was so impactful for myself was they weren't just saying these things. They would say it in a long form conversation like this, where not only do I get to trust the person that's saying these ideas, so that it's coming from someone with gravitas, with something they've proved to me in the rest of the conversation that they are someone useful to listen to, right? That's the first piece. Then they have enough time after the fact where when they talk about these things, they can show some examples of real world ways that these have changed them and helped them, and how it's going to help you. And that just makes it so it's not just a 5-minute, after school special that they're telling you about the importance of loving yourself or something. No, somebody really breaks down that concept that is very complex and has all these ways and gives you real actionable ways it's going to help you if you can accomplish this and all this stuff. That is so much different. And I really think there's an important piece to this whole puzzle of getting to know yourself, because I feel like I was trying to get to know myself for my whole life. But what really changed for me was, I think I really had some issues with myself. Definitely, I think a huge piece of it, I don't think it's all from this, but I think a big piece of this was body issues and really not loving myself, and really, I was quite overweight as a kid all the time. I always struggled with that. Not even that it was that bad, but in my head, it was so blown up in my family and so many dynamics around it, that when I would try and sit with myself and see the dark part, when the dark parts come up and you see like, oh, I'm angry or I'm jealous or all those instincts, I just had so much of my instinct was like, yeah, I know you're a piece of shit. And it reinforced those negative things. So, and that made the experience. So then when I sit with myself, well, this sucked. I sat with myself and I tell myself this shit all the time. I'm well aware, like, thanks, that sucked. Right. And I think that's what some people see when they go to it. And I don't know if this was a chicken and the egg thing or keep working on it got me to this point, but I think there was a certain point where I started to love myself more inside and out. And then when I was able to sit with myself and see those things, I would have a bit more compassion for them. And I'd say, oh yeah, you're an angry person, but let's investigate that. What happened to you, like in your childhood? Like, was there certain things that made you mad? What would make you mad? And it was some stuff like, I was always the youngest and nobody would listen to me. And I felt like I would have something to say, but nobody would listen, or that I'd get in trouble for things that I felt like I was intelligent enough that we've had a conversation about. I don't think I even deserve to be in trouble for this, right? Like, I feel like there was some more time for argument, but clearly as a relationship with a parent and kid, you can't give that to every kid. The world just wouldn't spin around. I think there's certain kids that need a little bit more. And I feel like maybe I could have got some of that And I was always, if I deserved it, I would take my licks. I was great at taking punishment, but every time, if a teacher got mad at me for something I didn't deserve, I didn't feel I deserved, I would go ballistic, and it would just, my anger would go off the hook because it felt like people using their positions of power to bully others. And I just hated that. And so ever since I was a little kid, I think it's just innate. And to have that little bit of love for yourself, to have compassion, just to ask those questions, why, and just to not just demonize yourself, allowed me to get to these next couple levels and to ask so many more questions and to figure out where so many things come from. And I just found that experience of sitting with yourself and trying to ask those questions is so much different if you can do it from a place of compassion and love for yourself, and to go in with that goal and knowing that that is a key piece. I need this. If I don't have this whole thing's going to fail. And I feel like that was never explained. I feel like I figured that out on my own. And I feel like I was hearing all these podcasts talking about, talk to yourself, ask yourself these questions, do these kind of things. Nobody ever told me you need to do that, but you need to do it with a lot of compassion, because there's going to be some rocks you turn over and you're not going to like what you see, and it's going to be tough and it's going to suck. But if you can do it with that love for yourself, that you are a good person, all this together, all the good and bad, you might be focusing on the bad right now, but there's so much good that counters it out and makes you a good person. It just helps you go through that experience and come out on the other side with useful pieces of information and things that are helping you going forward and help you be more focused on the good parts of you and have love for the bad. And I feel like that process helped me just bring together so many different parts of myself that were cordoned off and really become more, I don't even know what the word is, but just more realized almost of all the different parts of myself. And I found that was a huge aspect of that, sitting down with myself, was just having a little bit of love and compassion.
Wow. Yeah.
Long one, hey? Yeah.
Oh, that was so beautiful to just sit.
Oh, thank you. I appreciate it.
Sometimes I like, hear something like, I want to say something on that. Yeah. And then I get caught in what I'm going to say next. But yeah, but just, I was so in tune with everything you said about just the way you feel, the things you struggle with, and the how much you've caught on to. Yes, people will sit and judge themselves if they do turn over those rocks. Mm-hmm. But I think packaging the introduce yourself to yourself and be compassionate when you see things that you don't like, mm-hmm. that is kind of a much fuller picture.
Yeah, exactly. And I feel like just with that little caveat to the whole process, it can help you along. And I feel like that's what all of this is just helping to arm. Something that has blown my mind, and I've said a bunch of times on this podcast, so I apologize to people that have heard this before, is just so much of this, like that little conversation we had, one of the big ones, I don't know, do you know what imposter syndrome is? Have you ever heard of that? Yeah. So imposter syndrome, things like that, I think are so crucial and would help so many kids and aren't taught in school. I feel like these are all things that I learned about in university or after that. I'm like, man, why was this not in, high school or junior high, even like grade school curriculums? This is so important for your own mental health and just understanding what's going on. The mind is such an amazing thing, but such a mystery even still to us. And I feel like the people that, one of the biggest red flags these days is people that talk like they understand the human mind and the human body. I feel like that's a big issue lately with all the other stuff with people, wielding science as if it's the sword that just cuts through all these arguments, when if you really understood science, you'd understand how little we understand about the body and the mind and all this stuff. We are just we know like maybe 1%. It's a big 1%. It makes us feel real good. But really at the end of the day, we don't even know how half the shit works. Even some of our medicines, we don't know how they work. We just know that they work. And that's one thing, but nobody wants to admit that. And I feel like that knowing the limits of your intelligence and the limits of your ignorance is such an important aspect. And I feel like it's such an admirable thing. And again, something I see in people like Jordan Peterson, where he's the first person to say, I don't know, or that's a little bit outside, or I'm going to have to think about that. Or you'll see him grapple with it in the moment. He won't just, put on that facade to save face and just say, yeah, no, I know all about that and go along. And I feel like that's so admirable and so lost. And I feel like if we could have more of that in everything, things would just turn a little bit smoother and we'd all get along just that little bit better. It's that everybody's ego getting in the way from us, getting a little bit further down the path, is that feeling that we all have. And it's just natural to want to pretend we know everything about everything, even if it's of no help to anybody. Yeah. Oh, man. Well, I definitely have some more UK questions if I can ask them, in London specific ones.
Fire away.
So I'm curious, because I feel like for myself, and maybe this is specifically to being Canadian, growing up, we always knew that, we're part of the Commonwealth and all these things, and kind of had to ask, like, what? We're not our own country. We kind of had to ask all those funny questions and all that. And we learned about the monarchy and the royals and kind of who they were at that time. And I feel like I almost felt like I knew a little bit of the backstory even before I learned it in like grade 2 or 3, whenever it was, because my mom was obsessed with Princess Diana and was so into the royals that I kind of got an odd picture. But then I'll talk to some people and they have no idea, couldn't name one person to do with it over on this side. And I've seen that in so many people. Like, you can run the whole gamut of people that are obsessed with the royal family, know all about them around here, and then people have no idea. But I've never got to talk to somebody actually from Britain that can talk, like, what is the thoughts on the royal family, and what are kind of the camps of thinking on the ground there that actually have to deal with the ones that have a say about it?
Yeah, so it's interesting. This is only coming from people I've come into contact with. I haven't read any kind of extensive research on it. So I have come into contact with very different types of people. So there are some people who are royalists who just support the monarchy, just love the idea of it, are just very it's like, my dog is making noise.
It's all good. We're a dog we're a dog friendly podcast.
Or we can keep it in. Can't even find her now. I think she's under my chair. How bizarre. Okay, I'll just we'll just hear it in
it's no big deal.
So there's royalists who just will support the monarchy, whatever happens. Then there's people who, and I think this is how the monarchy view themselves as well, where they view the monarchy again as a responsibility, as they are not there to serve themselves. They're not there for their own. It's actually such a beautiful thing, because you look at someone like Kate Middleton. Do you know what? She is actually bothering me, and I can't concentrate.
No worries. Those dogs, they do that. They just like to, they can tell. Oh, look at you. Oh, they're so cute. Oh, my goodness.
And then I'm going to shove her out the door. So one second. Okay, go out. No, that way.
She just wants love and cuddles.
I know. There's 6 other people in the house. She can get
That's funny. But she can tell that you're busy doing other things, and that's the most attention she can get, is she's stealing it from somebody else. So that's just natural dog behavior, I think.
Yeah, I think so too. Definitely this one.
Yeah.
So just going back to kind of the beauty of how I see kind of the monarchy now, and this is really my view on it. I mean, someone like Kate Middleton, she's got, the most beautiful clothes, beautiful jewelry, but nothing belongs to her.
Right.
It's not like she can go out to some party and show off to all her friends that she's got, the crown jewels on her. Yeah. And it's such a weird thing, because it's like she does have everything, but she has nothing for herself. And I think that that's a key point to realize and appreciate about them, is that they really do just devote their lives, or devote a lot of their time to creating an image that is very popular around the world, that helps with our I'm sure it just helps, and it just infiltrates into just our popularity within. It helps with tourism. It helps with people taking interest in the UK, and they do a lot of charity work, and I'm sure they're able to raise loads more funds just being who they are and keeping up that image. And I think it's really admirable on their part that they're able to do that. So that would be kind of my view. And I don't support everything that they do. I'm not really a royalist. I don't believe in the kind of idea of a monarchy in itself, because obviously it can become corrupt, it can become useless. But the monarchy that we have has, I think, really managed to embrace what a monarchy should be, and has really been able to do that. So then, when we're kind of a bit more away from that, there are people who just think they're absolutely useless. They're like, why are we paying money, our tax money? And what's interesting about tax money is, I'm not sure. I think if people looked into it, and I have looked into it before, and I wish I had written it down, but most of the money that the monarchy have is actually their own. There's very little tax money, and allowances that go to the monarchy are usually only for public services. So it's not like you're paying for, Kate and William to have a nice dinner together in the most fancy restaurants. That's not what you're paying for. So it's just kind of good for people to look at those figures before they just get upset about something that might not even be the case.
Right.
But yeah, so then there's just people who think that they're useless, why they're here, and we're in 2021 and we don't need kings and queens. They're of old age. And I think the monarchy has really modernized. It's done such a good job at modernizing, and that's why it's so successful.
Right.
And I think there's obviously, a few people that, really the other end who are, who just hate them or feel like they're somehow really bad, rather than just being indifferent or like
yeah have some negative
like,
feelings there.
Yeah, they have some negative feelings towards it. Yeah. That's
interesting. And that's interesting to me, because that's kind of what I would think. I haven't really ever put too much thought towards it, if I'm honest, right? Like, of my feelings on the royals or monarchies in general. But just abstractly, you would think with the world going away from monarchies and that shift of the natural order of things being that being an exception to the rest of the world, I feel like that almost it forces them to be the epitome of what a monarchy should be, because it's not like they have all this historical, everybody else has monarchies, we're the same one, right? Like, they're kind of getting more and more on an island, and that probably I would imagine that would enforce them to be that representation, right? Like, if we're going to be around for any longer, we need to hold ourselves to that really high responsibility, which is, I don't know. My biggest thing is always just I just think of, a kid born into that family, like just the responsibility that is put onto that person, whether they want it or not. That is always a thing that I always struggle to wrap my head around. And you see these amazing stories of people able to shoulder that burden and do amazing things. But
we all have that, really. We're all kind of put on this life against our will.
Yeah.
We didn't really consent to being here. And we all have a responsibility to live well and to use our lives not for ourselves, but to kind of serve a bigger purpose. And of course, like, naturally, we will be doing lots of things for ourselves, and that's fine. But I think kind of the responsibility of being a good person is on everyone,
right?
And of doing good in the world is on everyone, just by virtue of being here.
Yeah, and you think about the one person in or 50 people maybe that are abstractly born into that versus the 7 billion. There's millions and millions of people that have way harder lives, that are born into situations that, very different types of responsibilities and things. But, you can be born to, a Cameroonian sand mining family, and you're, mining sand from the time you're 12 years old. Like, that is a different story too. I guess it's easy to have feelings about it when you really extract out to 1,000 feet. You can see it for what it is. And I think you're right. It's just that responsibility of whatever you're born into, whatever your circumstances. And I feel like that is almost, to get it back the full 360 to back where we started with the Peterson Palace group. I feel like that is almost the message that everybody's focusing on. There is so much right now is people focusing on all these other factors and outside forces that are holding people back, and the emphasis being put on that, where at a certain point we need to accept all those things and do things to try and even the playing field in some ways. But at the end of the day, everybody's responsibility to be a good person and to bring those things forward and to make the best of whatever situation they're put in should be that goal, that value that is put on a mountaintop for people to strive to. If you make everything, it's the world's fault, you can blame everything on other people holding you down, and you didn't ever do anything wrong. It's not that you're not working hard enough. You deserve all these things. You're entitled to all these things. That is a bad place to be if you want to flourish, right? Like, that's a bad mindset. If you just sit around waiting for the world to come to you because you've been wronged, you're going to sit there a long time. I know that that's a world that some people would like to live in, where, if by virtue of something you couldn't control at all, we're going to come in on a white horse and save you, like, that is not the world we live in. I know that's the world people want to live in. And I feel like just that understanding alone can get you into so much trouble these days. To just say something as simple as that, which I think is pretty harmless. In the right hands, I'm sure somebody could twist that into something that I'm not saying, but I just feel like that is such an important message, and something that, I don't know. I wish the world would buy into a little bit more and understand, I can't remember which book it was, Jordan Peterson's. He has one rule about not denigrating historical institutions without fully understanding them. And I feel like this is one of those, I feel like this is one of those things where people just shit all over it and denigrate it, but they don't really understand it and they don't really have a full idea of how the world works. And it just gets us into trouble because now we're playing in this fantasy world of how people want it to look and then trying to make that reality. And it's like, when has that ever worked in history? We need to, we still need to have compassion. We need to love everybody. We need to treat and we need to lift people up and help people. That is the goal. But if you make that, you have to be careful with how you try to achieve that, because there's very dangerous ways of, shooting for utopias in the past has been a surefire way for a lot of pain and suffering. So much, there's just example after example in history, and nobody seems to realize that lately, that this latest attempt to shoot for a utopian vision is not bringing the positives that they hoped it would bring, and is actually bringing a lot more negatives into the world that they're not realizing just yet. And they unfortunately are time dependent, where we're going to be seeing the repercussions of the things that are happening now, and the mindsets and the lack of conversation and the censorship. We're going to be paying for this 5, 10, 15, 20 years into the future. And these people that are brainwashed into some of these mindsets, it's not a short game. It's a long game. And I'm trying to find a way to switch that back into a question, but if you got something to say, give her.
Yeah, I've got something to say on that. Is that I can't remember who said it, but they said something like good times breed bad times and bad times breed good times. And just to elaborate to kind of what that means to me, I see it as like when we go through as a society something difficult, we always come out kind of stronger and more together. And then when we go through a togetherness and everything's good, people get complacent and they don't realize that it actually takes effort to be in that space.
Yeah.
And then things can get bad again. And then, so I just feel like society is going to have to go through what it goes through. And there's so little we can do. It's kind of like a stampede. If you try and fight against it, you might end up being trampled on. And it's not to say that we shouldn't in our personal lives make choices that make sense to us. But I do think there is a kind of a way of accepting that it's going to have to do its thing for now, whatever that looks like.
Yeah.
That might, in a way, be more useful to kind of, rather than bashing, it's like fighting fire with fire. I was talking about this on the group, instead of, I guess, posing this as a very well thought out clarity that I have in my head, I think it would be better to discuss it. So I was discussing this on the group, where it's like, do we fight fire with fire, or do we just accept certain things? And that's, do you know how Jordan Peterson says that if you trust somebody and you're giving them the best shot at them being the most trustworthy that they can be. So it's kind of like you're not guaranteed a good reaction from them, but you're giving yourself and them the best shot if you open your heart and trust them.
Yeah.
So I wonder if that works on a macro level. I'm not sure. So it's like kind of like, do we want to trust? So it's something like, I know this is an odd example, but I do think of it. So there's the Israeli-Palestinian conflict. And some of the stuff that goes on there is like, well, we can't trust the other side with power because then they're going to use it against us. But then it's like, well, unless you give them independence and give them what they need to feel like a society, then they're definitely not going to, they're definitely going to be fighting against it because they feel quite contained. And I'm not taking either side on that. I'm just looking at what does make sense, because historically it has been the strongest fires won. People fight fire with fire, they go to battle, and that has been the way of humanity. But at the same time, I feel like we've come to a place where violence and kind of these things are very much an issue, but do they solve? Is that how we solve things? I don't know. I
love exactly what you said. And that was something that the first person I had on from Peterson Pals was Ethan. And this is something I jumped on right away with. That is the biggest thing. I love that Peterson Pals group. I love the discussion it brings out. I love so much of it. I don't get to participate much. I just don't have the time like some of the people do to really jump into those conversations like I like to. But one of the biggest things I saw is that fire versus fire thing, and how so much of the time what brought that group together, what they're fighting against, the forces that everybody that's part of that group can see in an effort to fight against that, they're doing some of the same things, some of the same name calling, some of the same lack of compassion to see their side and to see the merits of their arguments. And that's what I've a couple of times I've stepped in on a group and just said, like, like somebody's made a meme of like, going after the woke snowflakes or whatever, I'm like, with love and compassion to see their side, right? Like I try to add my little piece in because I just see that. And I said to Ethan that I see this as very much an artifact of the age of the group, because I think it's, young, passionate, angry, fed up people. And that's exactly how I felt, 4 or 5 years ago. That's exactly where I was. And I've seen these things, but I found that as you get further, you see that that's not what brings anybody to your side. And that's exactly what they do. And the way the left and a lot of this wokeism just completely demonizes and paints the people that think differently than them as these idiots and these bumbling rednecks that do all these things. That is the exact same thing you're doing by painting them all with the same brush as these, radical hippies that, don't have anything in their head worth a damn in the real world. Neither of those two mindsets or templates to walk through the world are going to bring anybody from either side across. And I feel like both sides need to recognize the powers that be that are pulling people away and pulling people into these camps, and to have compassion for the best parts of the left and the best parts of the right and the best ideas and bring those together. That's what the messaging needs to be. And that's very tough to do. And you see this. I really like the analogy you said of, it's a stampede in your continent. It's almost like the stampede is going towards a cliff, and you can see it, but it's so hard to do. And if you try and just stop and turn around, you're going to get trampled and you're going to die anyways. And almost what you need to do is just do what you need to do in that moment and just, angle yourself off. And you might get some weird looks. People might be pissed off. Hey, you're bumping into me. We're going this way. Right. And you're just that buffalo, just angling off, and hopefully enough people see what you're doing. And as they see, and they start to look around, hey, why is this guy going this way? We always just go straight. We don't even know what's ahead of us. We don't need to. Just the fact of seeing somebody doing something different just opens their eyes. Holy shit, we're coming to a cliff. Let's go with this guy. And you kind of make yourself off. And that is that, instead of just trying to put your heels in the ground and dig in, sometimes it's just making that small move, doing what you can, leading by example, and bring yourself to a better point. And people will come to that. People will come to the realization, because whether it's left or right, those ideas are faulty at the base and they're circular in a lot of ways. And that comes crumbling down. And what you need to have is a safe place for those people that wake up to whether they're on the left or the right, and they've realized, hey, I've been sold a bill of goods that is not true. And this is not what I was promised. The left is not the bastion of helping people and sticking up for the little guy. No, they're the bastion of, corporate greed and all this stuff, and perpetrating the systems that they've set in place to keep the money flowing to them. Same with the right, just with a couple different names on it, and a lot of the same people, they're doing the same thing. And people get so locked into these tribes as if there's some good to them, when they got to realize that the tribe of good people, of just trying to be a good person and have good values, that's what everybody needs to move towards. And that's what we need to pull people that have been radicalized off to both sides, to that middle, to that, let's think from first principles on all these issues. Let's not be stuck with tradition of, no, we're for abortion because we've been for it, right? Or something like that. No, on every single issue, let's think about it, come to a decision, and leave openness for people to come in, right? If you just say, if you don't agree with us 100%, you're kicked out. It's very easy, because now people have easy ways to jump on that group. And I know exactly the rules are right here. If I follow these to a T, I'm part of this group and I don't have to worry. And that's what's so tempting for the left and the right, is there's these clear rules posted. This is what we believe. Everybody jump on board with them. But the unfortunate part is you can't pick and choose. You can't be for all these except for, oh, well, I'm left 100%, but I kind of like my guns, and I kind of like my I don't know, whatever else it is. You need to leave that open space in the middle for those people to come to, and to say, as a society, we don't want to fit into these two boxes you're saying we have to fit into. And it seems like the people making out like a bandit in this system of us being forced to pick two are all the people at the top that own these corporations and all these, and the ones that are funding both sides of these groups. It just doesn't make much sense to me, but I just don't know what, I don't know what to do about it other than lead by example and try and bring that idea forward in every opportunity I get, which I do very much. And anybody that listens to this podcast knows I bring that up at every chance I can. But other than that, I don't see what it is. And I feel like that's a natural instinct, is to fight fire with fire. And like myself in that group, when I see that, I just try and lovingly, not trying to combat or start a fight about it, just say, hey, maybe there's a better way to go about this. Maybe there's a a nicer way that we could help bring things forward and leave a little bit of room. Because if you just demonize all these people that are on the side when they wake up and realize, hey, maybe I've been brainwashed, maybe some of the stuff I've been fed isn't true, they're going to have nowhere to go, and they're going to just either dig in their heels and stay with this group. Well, there's nowhere else for me. But if you leave them a spot to, no, I see exactly what you went through. Let's commiserate about it. I can tell you exactly how you're brainwashed, what faulty reasoning, and there's some good stuff too. And that's what's the biggest thing that brings them over. So you can show them the positive sides of their ideology that they were with and what was coming from a good place. And you can say, hey, we have that too. We have the best parts of that here. That's really going to bring people in instead of just focusing on all the negatives. It's just going to push people away.
Yeah. And I think on that group, just to say something on the Peterson Powell group, there is a lot of really polite and like intellectual and reasoning, and a lot of love, and a lot of I think that's one of the key elements of the group that actually makes it so unique, is that there are a lot of right-wing, people who identify more on the right of economics or on the right of politics, but there's a lot of compassion, understanding, and I guess humility. I think it does come down to humility, where
I agree,
where you kind of appreciate that you don't know everything, and there might be something that someone else is saying that you can learn from. So you definitely get a lot of, not a lot, a few people who would, post things that, but I think they also get called out, by the way. Yeah. I've seen lots of people calling out other people, being like, this is a straw man argument, or this is, this is a pointless comment because you're just name calling. So it's very funny, haha, good joke, but that's not productive.
And how many people in their life have even had that term thrown at them? I think that's straw man argument. I would argue that maybe 0.1% of the entire global population has ever had that thrown back at them, has ever had somebody push their ideas that much, right? And just to see that and to have to rebound, holy shit, that was strong. Okay, you're right. And I find that is the one place where that works, right? Like if you were just on the regular Facebook comment section somewhere and you throw that out to somebody, they're just going to dilute to name calling. Whereas in this situation, that is just not an option on the table. If somebody comes to you and says, hey, I don't think you're actually arguing, you just argued a completely different thing. And now you need to, if you want to back up that and hold this position, you need to bring more to the table and to force people to do that. I just think that is such a important piece. And I love that you nailed that part about the humility, because I think in what I think a huge piece of this is that if you sign up for that set of rules on the left or the right that says exactly what you need to be, the top rule on both sides is don't be humble about this. This is gospel. You follow this to a T. Don't be humble about it. If somebody from the other side tries to change your mind, don't listen to them. That's rule number one. And that is the biggest thing that stops them from hearing anything else. And the biggest part of this group is that it's the opposite of always be humble, always assume somebody else has no. I think that's one of Jordan Peterson's rules. Always assume somebody has something you don't know, or whatever that is, right? Like, yeah. It is so crucial to the whole thing working. It's just always walking through life. I mean, I'm a big martial arts guy, and they always talk about it as the white belt mentality. If you walk through the world as if you are always the white belt, you walk into any gym, you can always learn something from it. Even if you are the peak of the peak, you are the UFC world champion, baddest man on the planet, haven't been tested in years. You still, if you want to stay there, you have to walk into every gym wherever you go, like you're the greenest guy there, and be able to learn from everybody. Because if you're not, you will stagnate and everybody will catch you. And that's just one area, but I think that's life. You need to always be humbling yourself and forcing yourself to that area where I don't know shit. And I feel like that is so powerful. People think that that's a place of weakness, but it's such a place of power if you understand it right. I don't know jack shit is the strongest place you can be, because from there you can learn, and you're not blinding yourself to other opportunities. And I think that is something that comes out of this and is purposely torn away from people that they're trying to put into these groups, because that is a very dangerous thing to your group's powers, to have people within that with that kind of idea set of, hey, I don't know shit. Like, man,
can I actually give you a really cool example of this?
Yeah, of course.
I'm going to bring out my phone because this is on TikTok, and I'm going to put the sound down so that doesn't. But so Jordan Peterson posted something on TikTok,
right?
And I'm gonna bring up the video, and I commented on it, and somebody came back to me with like a really snappy comment, and I thought, okay, there's a couple. I could go back to them with like a really snappy comment back, or let's see how this goes, and we can. And it's on Jordan Peterson's video, so you can actually check this. This is legit. Let's go to the video real quick. And okay, so this is how the comments went. Okay, so the annoying thing is, it's that they're not in order.
Oh, that old thing. I have yet to download TikTok or go onto it. I have not seen it yet. I am battling and I'm kicking and screaming with everything I have to not get on there yet.
To not get on. Okay, you can dig your heels in on that, because it can really waste your time. So and I did write my comment. I will agree, was just like a snappy passing comment. So someone was talking in there about war and how you have to be willing to die in order to go to battle. And hey, you know what, can I, I'll just play it.
Yeah.
Okay, listen.
And ignorant. If you are going to go to war, there's two types of will that you need. The first type of will that you need to have is you have to have the will to kill. It is not just the will to kill the enemy. War is an imperfect endeavor. That sometimes you're going to drop a bomb and it's going to land and it's going to kill women and children. And then on top of that, obviously, you have to have the will to die.
Okay, so that was the clip, and I put, and this is why war is the dumbest thing that exists. So yes, it wasn't a very intellectual comment. It wasn't a very kind of thought out comment, but that is kind of how I feel about this. If you have to be willing to kill innocent people, be willing to die yourself, be willing to drop a bomb, and it's necessary, but it doesn't make sense in my brain that it's a kind of smart idea. It doesn't make sense to me. So that's what I put. So someone just said, really, you honestly believe that people can live together? I wish I was that naive. So I put, he said, you honestly believe that billions of people, most with very low IQs, can all come together and say, let's not fight. I wish I was that naive. So then I had a conversation with him back and forth, and we actually hashed it out on Instagram. On TikTok.
Yeah.
And we hashed it out, and he said, we are a very prosperous country here in America, and yet we're always in wars. Greed will always win. War is inevitable. So then we realized that we had different definitions of what war was. So I said, I think we have different definitions of war. Political polarization isn't war. So he says, oh, gotcha. So what do you think personally? So what do you personally think could be avoidable? And suddenly he got interested. And suddenly we came and we were kind of had this back and forth. And at the end, and this is the bit I really wanted to bring to this conversation, he said, it's funny what happens when two people have a respectful discussion. They find out they have similar viewpoints, very rare on the internet now. So now this is a guy, no idea who he is from Adam. He said a snappy comment back, I wish I was so naive. And I could have just been like, well, you are naive or something. I don't know. I could have been back. But I thought, I'll take the time. And I guarantee you, if you take the time, if you have the patience, you will come to that with most people that you connect with.
For sure.
And so I feel like I took a really long time to just make this really simple point. But
no, I think it's an important point.
Yeah, it's like, and if you don't want to take the time, then don't assume that that's not going to happen. So it's like, fine, if you don't want to take the time to listen, because I get it, it's time consuming. You don't want to be on TikTok writing back and forth. But then you don't have to assume that they're disagreeing with you or they're wrong. Then you can make the assumption that, if we hash this out, we probably might come to more similarities than differences. Right. I feel like that guy said, it's very rare on the internet, and it's very just rare in general nowadays.
Mm-hmm. Yeah, and that's kind of what that's what I think all the time. And I feel like more people need to understand while they're on the internet is that whatever happens there, if they were to take that time to either hop on a call like this where you can see each other and have a discussion, you're gonna find that place. Like online, it emphasizes when we talked about that 90% we're all the same, then 10% within that is culture, who you are as a person, right? All that fits in between that 10%, right? So it's so small. But what happens on the internet is we know deep down, everybody knows that we're all the same, right? So we're trying to emphasize that 10% and trying to show and really try to de-emphasize the 90% that holds us all together, which is the biggest thing that's on the forefront when you're actually walking face to face with people, when you're interacting that, because it's natural. We understand that we've had thousands and thousands of years of evolution to teach us that knows that that's that base operating system. We're all very similar. On the internet, you get on there and you start to see everyone trying to show their individuality and all these things, and they don't understand, and they don't realize how close to everybody else their ideas are. Like, one of the biggest ones I struggle with right now is with COVID, and people will post these memes about from either side that are just so, the only thing they serve is polarizing people. They don't actually, they're inaccurate for the most part from both sides that are fighting on each side. And it's like, do you want to jump in and say like, hey, I know that you aren't a bad person, and I know that you're trying to just, you're coming from a good place, right? If you're posting this thing like, oh, if anybody has any questions for the science, you're an idiot, don't talk to me, and all these things, right? Like, it's like, man, if me and you sat down for 20 minutes and had a conversation, I promise you would learn some things. I would learn some things, but we'd come out and we'd find that we're very close on our ideas, and we're not that far away. But people just want to, I don't know what it is. It seems like people still even understand that, just want to go out and light fires almost. Like, they know that they.
Interesting. The COVID thing is like puzzles me, because it's almost like, it's, if you don't want to have a vaccine, or if you don't want to if you don't want to, I don't know, if you don't want to wear a mask, then just don't. Why do you have to tell someone else that this is what you're doing? Why do you have to like almost infuriate other people, especially when you know that they're on the other side of things? Why do you have to convince or influence or change other people's minds? Just live your life. Just don't have a vaccine. Just don't wear a mask. Do your thing. If you're in a position of power, if you're a Jordan Peterson, then yes, you want to think out your position, and people, you will be influencing a lot of people. So you do want to think about what you're doing. Right. But as a regular human being, why do we have these just just silly arguments that just bring so much animosity, bring both sides bad feelings. Yeah. Do what you want to do.
Exactly. But I think that is the obvious mindset when you're thinking about it from that middle ground, you know, kind of what we're talking about earlier of, you know, you have this set of rules and things that you have to follow and ideas on the left and on the right. So the first rule we said is, you know, don't have any humility about this. Don't listen to the other side. But then the second rule is, and you also need to propagate these ideas as if they're your own very passionately, right? Like, so that's the part of it. If you're going to be team left, you need to show your allegiance to team left by demonizing the other, by throwing out these, like when you're in the middle, you can see the only thing this is serving right here, this doesn't help anybody. It just virtue signals your position and hurts the other side and riles up the other side. Right. And then same thing from the other side. If you're posting that COVID's not real and all this stuff, like that doesn't help anybody. All that does is rile up the other side. You're not helping anything. You're just, you're stuck in your tribal ways and you're just trying to put forward memes and ideas that serve this already. You're not trying to find ideas that serve yourself. You're trying to find ideas that serve your tribe and what you've been told to think. And I feel like that is such a dangerous position to be in, because now you are propagating it. You're right. To me, I agree. Why does anybody care about other people? And I know we can say it's a pandemic and that like their choices affect you, but not directly, right? Like not in that sense. And you can also have control about who you see. And if you really think somebody is that unsafe and that reckless that you don't want to be around them, very rarely are you going to be forced to be around them, especially right now, especially where I live in Canada, where everything's, I don't know how the UK is right now, but locked down almost to a T, right? You can't even, they have it locked down where I live. You can't hang out with more than 5 people outside right now. Like it's outside. Like what are we even talking about? Like this isn't, how do you call that science? Like what science are you following there that has said, when we've known from a month into this pandemic that it very rarely transmits outside, right? Especially during the day. Like just so much of this doesn't make sense. But then they can wield the sword of science and just say, no, I'm right. And all it does is piss off the other side and doesn't really bring people together. And just, I just feel like there's so much pain and so much suffering right now going on in the world. And I feel like I really like the idea of when Jordan Peterson and Sam Harris did those talks and they went around kind of going back and forth on religion and their ideas, they had kind of landed on an idea of what the largest goal for everybody is just to be eliminate suffering, right? Unnecessary stuff. Suffering is a part of life. You can't eliminate suffering. If you make that your goal, you're going to fail. You're setting yourself up to fail because it's an innate part of life. There is suffering in life, but unnecessary suffering and purposeful suffering that you create for people is what everybody needs to fight against. And that should be the viewpoint that everybody looks through. And right now, all it seems is like there's so much suffering going on in the world due to this COVID thing. And so many people's reaction to that is just to increase that suffering, to piss off the other side, to make themselves feel good by like, that is just such a poor place to be. And that is, their definition of that. If you're causing suffering, unnecessary suffering, that is hell, right? And if you're alleviating unnecessary suffering in the world, that is heaven, right? Like they're changing those ideas of what this can be. And for so many people right now, they're just propagating hell around them by creating suffering for other people instead of being one of those people that can come with a place of compassion. Hey, if you see this way, because that's where I'm at, is like, I'm very much in the middle of, I don't think COVID's not real, but I don't think it's what people are saying it is. And I think some of the restrictions are ridiculous, but I have so much compassion for people on both sides because I can see, how can I look down upon somebody that is, locked in their house, terrified right now, scared of this disease and going after people, because for 12 months, that's all it's been on the news is just fear mongering. How can I question them or think less of them for buying into that when that's all that's been thrown at them for all this time? And then on the other side, how can I feel bad, or how can I completely demonize this guy who has questions about this COVID thing when there's so much fuckery going on and so much people lining their pockets through this and so much corruption and the showing the cracks in the system right now? How can you blame people and look bad about them and demonize them and call them names for falling into that? And clearly it's been gamified and people have taken it too far to get their clicks on YouTube, and they'll, throw Bill Gates under the bus to prop up these theories and stuff. But for me, in the middle of both those sides, I have a lot of compassion for both of those sides. And if I was on the left, I wouldn't demonize those guys because I can see how they got there. I don't agree with it, but I can see how they got there. But if I'm on the right, I'm not demonizing these guys for being so overly afraid and so willing to give up their freedoms because they're that scared, because there's these billion-dollar systems propagating that and making them feel that way. That's where I'm at in the middle, just like, man, I can see compassion for both sides on this. But what I don't have compassion for is you making it worse for the other ones. I have no time for that. If all you're doing by sharing these things is just trying to piss people off, I got no time for you. And that's the biggest thing. I feel like I've seen so many people from both sides just say like some sort of statement of like, I'm so glad of this pandemic. They really showed me who these idiots are that they don't know science and I can't even have them. Right. And then I see on the other side, this pandemic really showed me who I can't hang out with and all this stuff. It's like, man, this pandemic just showed me who I think, has some issues that need to work on themselves and really, need to do some self-love and really get to know themselves. Cause it seems like you're just propagating your own issues out into the world on social media. And it's just the obviousness of that is what frustrates me, because it seems like, I don't know how people can't see that as much. And I know there's these huge systems trying to keep them from seeing it that way and to keep them locked into their bubble, but man, it's just, it's frustrating.
Yeah. Maybe this is something, I don't know if you've thought of it like this before, but I find people dip in and out of different moods the whole time. So I can be in a really kind of upset state of mind. I can be in a really peaceful state of mind. And however I show up in the world is kind of like where I'm at in that moment. And so when people rile up or say something not nice, if you take that really seriously as like, this is who they are, this is what they really think, and they just want to cause trouble. I think you kind of lose the kind of idea of like, no, they're just in kind of the same mood I'd be in when I say things that I don't want to be saying. And I find that so helpful in like relationships and with my siblings, with my parents, my friends, just anyone that I'm in a relationship with. When they say something, and if I just know, oh, okay, I get the difference now between someone's in a bad state of mind and someone has a misunderstanding. There's a very big difference. And usually when there's a misunderstanding, people are open to hearing things and you can have a conversation. Yeah. When it's a bad state of mind, there's no room for that. And then you realize, oh, it's a bad state of mind. Okay, fine, I'll leave that. And I just think that's the way I understand things, where people say things that are provocative or, rile people up or anything that you were discussing. I think it really does come from a place of like, that's how they're feeling in the moment. People take it too seriously. They get into a whole big thing about it,
Mm-hmm.
and then the ego steps in and there's no going back, because they're like, oh no, I've gone this far,
Mm-hmm.
How am I going to go back? And there's no room for them to come out of themselves, because their ego is at stake.
Mm-hmm.
The only other thing I wanted to pick up was, you said that people will do this to make themselves feel good.
Mm-hmm.
And I think that's true, but I think the irony of that is that, like, how long is it going to make you feel good for?
Mm-hmm.
It's like, it's the same with, like, I don't know, eating a piece of cake, or like, or I don't know, doing something that in the long run isn't good for you for a little quick. And people don't associate that as the same as doing a short run thing. Like, oh, I'll say this, I'll make myself feel better. They don't associate that with like the same, but I literally see it as the same. It's like you saying something to get yourself, let's say you're feeling really riled up and you've just got to say something because you think it will diffuse your anger, and you say it, and you get huge ramifications for that. It's like, short-term gain, really long-term loss. And I think that don't know where that came from, but it seemed appropriate to say at the time.
Yeah, no, for sure. And I think that's definitely a big piece of the pie of what we see online, is that, I agree that I think that's something I see all the time, especially at work, with that was something I've talked to all the coworkers about all the time, is the benefit of the doubt, and giving people the benefit of the doubt that they're just having a bad moment, or that they were having a bad day, and that that's not who that is, and that we've worked together for how long, we know that we enjoy each other. Why would we throw all that away for one moment where maybe one person said something like, it's so hard to do. It's not an easy thing to ask of people, but the benefits are so great. But I find that online, that all goes away, and you're always assuming you're never assuming a misunderstanding. You're always assuming that it's coming from that bad place, or that somebody's being snotty, right? Because the internet is just kind of a snotty place. I don't know why that came up, but that is almost the base template. The default is that people assume, oh, this guy just isn't just misunderstanding my position, and is actually probably a lot closer to myself on the way they think. You just assume that they're questioning you, or questioning your understanding, or somehow it pulls out the ego, like you said, and it just makes it so that you're in a position where the conversation can't be had, because the one side is just assuming that you're not here to converse, you're here to battle. And I think that is what makes it so difficult. Oh, did I lose you? I'm talking to myself the whole time. You see, this is why I do solo podcasts, because I just podcasted for probably 30 seconds there where I think Sora was already off, and I just kept talking to myself and had no issues. I'm just going to keep talking to you guys and hope that Sora joins back in, and then I don't have to do any editing. I don't know if that's going to work. I don't know how it's going to work. I don't know if she can get back on. I should probably, what did I just do? Oh no, we're good. We're good. All right. Well, I'm going to have to edit this out. I'll send her a text. How are you guys? Feeling good lately? Enjoying the conversations? Too much COVID? Not enough COVID? What's your thoughts? I lost you. No, I know when it comes to certain things like my podcast, family, these things, I can't be compromising. I need to be very steadfast in holding myself and holding my ground there. But you're right. If it's somebody being mean to you in a coffee shop or something, and it's like, oh, is this just serving myself to, let's just let it go, water off the back. And I feel like that is very important to know, and just adds even higher emphasis on being honest with yourself and getting to know yourself, and being very aware of your value system and where that lies and why.
That goes back.
Yeah.
And that goes back to what we were saying much earlier about introducing yourself to yourself. This is an added benefit of that.
Exactly.
Because then you really know what's important to you. And then you can gauge, how do I respond to this? How do I react in this situation? Because you really know, and you end up not regretting things. And because you're so in touch with yourself, you don't think, oh, I wasn't true to myself in that situation. Because if you're trying to figure out what you want, whilst you're in the middle of a conversation, you don't have that much time to figure out what you want and then to figure out how to react.
Yeah, exactly.
If you know yourself prior to that, you've got the space to know, what do I want? what's the appropriate way to react, and what's the kind of trade-off between standing my ground or letting it go. And that's the added benefit. So, you know how you were saying, you kind of, when you listen to other people giving good ideas, you want to see kind of tangible results from it.
Mm-hmm.
I feel like that's something that resonates. I feel like that's something that's helped me specifically in those situations. So it definitely is helpful in all these areas of life that it creeps into, just being a successful human, I guess.
Yeah. And then on the flip side of that, of the consequences, if you don't do that work, is now you're going to be walking through life and things are going to be haunting you and you'll have no idea why. And that is a scary place to be as well, where you are so out of touch with what you want and what you value. And you've been just, getting through by taking on societal values and all these things. And that works for so long, but now you'll start to be unhappy in this and you won't know why you're unhappy. And so much of this will creep in. And I feel like there's probably a lot of people that'll listen to this and maybe resonate with that too. And that is maybe a sign that you need to do some work on yourself and to ask yourself some questions and to find that stuff out. Because if you're going through life making compromises all over the place, but you don't know which ones are working, which ones aren't, but you just don't feel good, that's a scare. I've been there where, societally, all these things that are happening are great. And I'm making lots of money. I have, not fame, but, power, I guess. Like I can tell people what to do if I wanted to. I don't really like telling people what to do. It's not really my thing, but all these things that society tells you should want. And there wasn't a lot of happiness there because I hadn't really sat down with myself and asked why, what do you want? And what do you value and all these things, right? Like for so long, I was going on just this path of, okay, I'm going to, get good marks in high school because that's what my parents told me to do. Right. And if there's consequences, if I didn't, then I'm going to go to university. And I don't know what I want to do, but I know I want to make money because money seems to be the biggest thing. So I'm going to go get a business degree. And that's what I did. And then you graduate and now I'm going to get a job that pays me lots of money because that's what I went and got this business degree for. And all along the way, you're never checking into yourself and you're doing it along for other reasons. And you're not asking why. And then the results, the results come out. They're coming out either way. The way you feel about all that is going to happen regardless of that. And that's when I needed to, when those dark feelings started to come and the unhappiness was creeping in, even though all the exterior factors would point you I should be as happy as I've ever been if all that holds true, right? If money is what it's all about, I should be over the moon right now, but I'm not. And that forced me to ask some tough questions, to sit and realize, okay, what do you value? What do you want to do with your life? Like, what would you want to do? And I had to make some really big changes. And that was really scary for some people around me. And, there was a lot of things that kind of tried to subtly make me compromise away from this vision that I created of what I think is going to really be rewarding to me. And in little ways, in big ways, it just people, I think that's scary too, for people to recognize in themselves when somebody takes a big step like that and says, to hell with all these societal expectations, this is what I want. And that I think brings up feelings in lots of people that they don't want to look at. And maybe that was one thing, maybe they really wanted to chase being a dancer or something at a young age, but they got pregnant and they went off into a different thing. And to see somebody do that in that moment, it really brings up some different feelings for them. And I feel like that's something to navigate as well. As, it's one thing to be aware and honest with yourself about what you want. It's a whole nother thing to act it out and to not compromise, because there's going to be a lot of people all along the way. One of the best books I read for this was Ayn Rand's A Fountainhead, of just seeing all of the forces that are going to be at work that are trying to get you to compromise, and the value that can be gotten if you refuse. And if you hold yourself to that value system where you're going to be uncompromising in your vision and really see it through to the end and gain those skills and be that person you need to be, the payoff at the end can be astronomical, but it's very difficult. And I feel like that's kind of Jordan Peterson's message is, if your aim is not difficult, you probably need a new aim, kind of thing, right? Like you need to find something better. If it's not testing you, if it's not pushing you to your limits, if it's not really pulling out everything that's within you, maybe you need to try something else. And I find that piece of information, maybe more than anything else, is so important and such a thing that people need to hear, because I think it's so easy just to take on those societal things of, oh, well, societal tell me what to chase. Yeah, I'll get the job that, everybody else around me says I should have, and that's what I'll do. And maybe I shouldn't say that. Maybe some people can be really happy with that and can find happiness other places where it doesn't matter what they do. They'll just be naturally happy. I don't know. But to me, I just knew for myself that wasn't working, and I tried it and it didn't work. And now I'm trying something else, and it seems to be It's not perfect, but it's going a lot better. So that's what I've seen. And hopefully people can take something from it.
Yeah, do you know what comes to mind when you say that? Is just, do you know if you've seen The Notebook?
Oh, we love The Notebook. One of my favorite movies.
Okay, yeah, I love it too. But there's this bit where, and I forgot the people's names, but basically it's kind of towards the end when do you know the names?
I can't. I'm trying to think of some of my favorite lines from to see if they say a name, but I can't think of it.
No, it's not a name. I'm just trying to. Okay, so it's the main guy in the movie, and the
Ryan
main
Reynolds.
Girl in say it. Okay, so Ryan Reynolds, and who's the other woman, and here's the
or Ryan Gosling. Sorry, not Ryan Reynolds. Ryan Gosling, and what is her name? Oh, it's gonna kill me. Rachel McAdams.
Rachel Adams. Okay, so I'm gonna call them their actual names because I can't remember. Anyway, so Ryan Gosling, and Rachel Adams. So she has kind of gone. I think she's engaged to another man, and she comes back to the house, and there's this scene where there's the car outside, and she's come out the car, and it's quite kind of an emotional scene, and he just says to her, and she's kind of worrying, she's like, but I've made my commitment to someone else, and but I do really love you.
It's my favorite scene.
Yeah, okay, so she's going back and forth, but the bit that like gets me, he just says, what do you want? What do you want? And I just ask myself so many times when I get into this whole like, oh, but this, and I'm just like, what do you want? And I don't know, I feel like that's what it comes out. It doesn't matter what that looks like. You could want to be a plumber. You could want to be a therapist. You could want to be a podcast person. You could want to be a lawyer. But it has to be what you want. Otherwise, I don't think you're going to feel that satisfaction and that happiness in your life. So yeah, so like, what do you want?
Yeah, exactly.
It's a good moment.
Oh yeah, and that is also just one of my favorite scenes. Just to quote, I feel like every time my girlfriend is trying to figure out what she wants for dinner or what she wants, it's always, what do you want? I just yell that at her all the time in a loving way, of course. But it's funny that you brought that clip up because it's probably
there's so many ways that you could use that line.
Oh yeah,
it's like, what do you want, or what do you want, or like, you can do it all different ways.
Oh, it's great.
What do you want?
Yeah, exactly. And it's such a powerful scene. I mean, just powerful movie all around. I could talk about The Notebook for probably 3 hours on its own, but yeah, no, I think it also comes back to the power of a why and why you're doing something, right? And is it what you want? But I think a way to get you to that, is it what you want, is to ask yourself why you're doing certain things and why, right? Like I've just in having these conversations with so many people, right? Like 60 odd people so far, I've got to sit down and pick their brains and see, try and pull current or common threads between them all of what makes people successful, what makes people happy, what makes people tick. And over again, it comes down to the why and why they're doing something. And that has so much importance. And I feel like it's one of those cliches, right? Talking about people's whys, but it cannot be overstated enough just how important that is to what you're doing. And if you haven't sat there in a quiet place with no distractions and asked yourself why you're doing the things you're doing right now deeply, you are doing yourself a disservice. Everybody could do that. Everyone listening to this today, at some point, find 5 minutes, turn your phone off or turn it on silent, just sit in a room and ask yourself why, and have a little conversation with yourself for 5 minutes. Why are you in the job you're doing? Why are you in the relationships you are? Are they serving you? Why? It might bring up some bad things, but the payoffs of what asking that question is, and just even if you are super happy with all the decisions, just that double check in, that feeling of being on track, and that the whys are there. It can just be that motivation to get you through a couple of days, or it might be the motivation for you to make a big change. But until you ask that question, you're just at the whims of your ego, and you're at the whims of the world at that point, right? Like if you're not,
you're also at the whims of your previous self.
Yeah,
at the whim of like your 18-year-old self.
Yeah, fuck yeah.
Like, oh yeah, I kind of put myself in the situation when I was 18. It's like, well, do I really want to be here?
Yeah.
And I've had a mindset of what things are and how things work from then, and you're just a slave to that.
Yeah.
The rest of your wow. Question.
I love what you just said there, because I felt like so deeply that's one of the big realizations I had was always at a certain point, I could look back, and see who I was a couple of years ago, and to see the growth and the change that has happened, and to be okay with that. And again, this is one of those areas where you need to have a lot of compassion if you're going to do this practice, is to look back at yourself and not be embarrassed of, when I look back on myself at 20, 18, 19, 21, like university time, like, oh, what an idiot. Like, God, that kid was so stupid. Like, had no experience, all this stuff, thought he knew everything at that point. And to look back and then to see year over year, when I'm 22, looking back at 21 and be like, oh, what an idiot was. When I hit 23, looking at 22, what an idiot was, right? Each year after year, but to know that there's always been growth and I'm always seeing that. Whereas I think some people can get stuck where they'll go periods of time, it might be a family or it might be a certain job where they just get stuck and you get in a rut and 10 years goes by and you're the same person and you haven't moved forward. I feel like that's so important. And the only way that can happen is if you're really not checking in with yourself. And I think it's an avoidance tactic to a lot of people just to know, I don't want to check in with myself right now on this one area because I know I'm not going to like what I find. So I'm just going to ignore it and not ask myself these questions and just stick with it and just stick with it. And then you find yourself 10 years down the road and you're very unhappy. And all it would have taken is one session of just sitting there and asking yourself why, and asking yourself a couple hard questions. And it might get you on a completely different path that'll bring you somewhere 10, 15 years down the road where you are in a much better position to where if you just kept static and held yourself to the same old expectations and the same ideas of who you were. Oh, yeah. That is such a powerful point.
When you ask that question to yourself, and don't take my word for it, because see if this makes sense to you, but it's like, it's very plausible to have the answer just be because it feels right. Because it feels right. Why am I doing this? Because it feels right. Why am I doing this? Because I want to.
Yeah.
Because I really, really want to. It doesn't have to be a whole because, have a whole fancy answer to things. I think it's true to say, and you can make your own kind of conclusions on that, but I think it's true to say that just saying it feels right is a really plausible and probably one of the best answers.
For sure.
Why you're doing it.
And I think that brings it back kind of the way you first talked about it is doing things for you and asking yourself, is this what I want? What do I want? Right. And I feel like then I kind of switched it to talking about just asking why, but that kind of brings it back to that is now, because it feels right can be expanded to because it feels right to me, right? It doesn't feel right to your parents, doesn't feel right to the people around you, to your friends. It feels right to you. That is what you're asking yourself is, am I doing this because I want to? Do I have reasonings behind there? Is it coming from me or is this coming from other places where I got to a point and then, if I was asking myself, why am I in this job? Well, because it makes a lot of money. Why is that valuable? Because, that'll make my parents happy, like why, but that's not me. That's not what I want. I don't need all this money, right? Like I got to prove to myself that I was very, very happy living in a, 10 by 10 room, with a bed and a desk in it through university for 4 years, right? Like very small scale. I was the happiest I've ever been. I don't need all these things. Those are great and those can bring happiness too. But at the end of the day, that money that I was chasing for other reasons and that wasn't coming from within. That was never something that I had huge emphasis on. And I think I'm very lucky because of that. I think it's because I grew up very well off, very lucky. And I feel like I never had to have that feeling of, that desperation for something, for anything. And I feel like that is a very motivating factor. And I feel like I feel like I'd be more the exception than the rule to people to not have that. So I'm not discounting that and that drive to get things into create, as long as it's coming from you. That's all that matters. It's not the drive itself that, or the goal or what you're setting your sights on. It doesn't matter as long as it's coming from you and it's not coming from external sources. That's what's going to bring you happiness. If you're chasing something for you because you want to chase it, not because society's told you that's what to chase, or your parents or your friends, like you say, as long as it's with you, you'll figure it out, right? At the end of the day, like, kid, you'll figure it out. Kind of one of those things. Like as long as you have your aim and your value system in check to start with, that's the compass that's going to bring you for the rest of your life. There's going to be ups and downs and dips and peaks and valleys and hardships, but if you're centered right, you'll end up somewhere you're pretty happy with, I think, in the long run.
And I can guarantee you on this for myself, when you have that, this feels right, like a truly in sync. I call it in sync, but in flow. How Jonathan Haidt calls it in flow in his book, Hypothesis of Happiness. The confidence that comes with that. Anybody could tell you anything, but you will be secure about it because it's something. So it's such a it's hard to describe when you're not in that situation. I don't know if you've ever been in that situation, but I've had things where I just knew I needed to do this. And that assurance from myself was better than anyone else telling me it was a good idea, better than anything coming up, like any obstacles I came up against. It was like, this is nothing. This is nothing in the face of me knowing I need to do this.
Or the consequence of me not doing it.
Oh, yeah. Say more about that.
I just say, you have to notice the consequences of not doing it, right? Like you say something when you ask, is there something you have like that, like this podcast, right? Like when I finally was honest with myself and said, like, I want to do this, it was, like you say, so sure. It didn't matter what other people had to say about it. I was so sure and was making that decision, and there's nothing that could touch it. And I was so happy with my decision, and so much happiness was around there. But if I didn't do it, I think the consequences would be to look out, like, can you live with yourself not chasing that dream? If you put it aside, right? Like, and that dream could be anything. That could be dance. That could be all these things. Can you live with yourself by not giving it a full shot? I can live with this crashing and burning and failing. At least I tried, right? Like, that's fine. I don't think I could live with myself of never trying this and never actually giving it a full crack, or lying to myself enough to, oh no, this is the podcasting's bullshit. There's no way. It's all the algorithms and all that stuff. Like, that's an excuse too. That'd be giving up. I think as long as I give this a full try, I'm happy. Even if it never amounts to anything, I'd be happy with it. And that's kind of the, another.
What do you mean never amounting to anything? Sorry, I'm picking you up on that, because what do you mean? Because there's always something that comes up. I mean, first of all, you're doing what you want. Right. So that's something.
Oh yeah.
Second of all, you're like, I don't know, you're giving other people an opportunity to express their ideas. That's something. You're being able to formulate your values and being questioned on things, questioning other people, your listeners, everything. That's something.
Right.
So I feel like that's like, sorry, yeah. Go ahead.
No, for sure. I agree with that. And I think that's a very important piece. And I think I do need to clarify that too, of, like what it amounts to. That all is within my head. Of the reason I talk about it amounting to something is because I have such big dreams and such huge visions for what it can be one day, and for where I want to take not only this podcast, but other podcasts, and to change the way that people look at what a podcast can be. Like, I have huge dreams for this. And then judging off of the success of what I can build this into, I have other side businesses and other things I want to expand it to. Like, my dreams are so huge that that even if I never was to achieve all of those, right? Like, I'm a fairly confident guy, and I have a lot of confidence that I will get it there, and I will be able to bring all these things to fruition. And it seems like throughout my life, whenever I put myself to something like that, I've always been able to make it happen. I've never gone up against anything. Like, I don't know if I have some special ability just to manifest things into the world, but it seems like I do. And I don't want to, until I find out something that proves me otherwise, I'm just going to keep rolling with it. But I'm just saying that even if I didn't, I'm still so happy just and enjoying the process so much that even if all those huge dreams never came to fruition, and it just ended up being more of a, a modicum, or maybe something else happened where, maybe I really like raising kids and being a stay-at-home dad, and I have to back the dreams off of where I can eventually take it and just have it more within, still fulfilling out what I wanted to do, but with other things added in that are also bringing me happiness, right? Because I think if you get too locked down on one idea of what the future is going to be, you don't allow yourself room to pivot. I think that is also important too, of just recognizing that, hey, that I might choose to go on a different path at a certain point. I can't see it right now of me doing anything else but this because of how much I enjoy it. But I don't know, maybe some new technology comes out in 2 years that changes our entire world if we know it, like the internet did. And maybe there's some new, internet 2.0 version of podcasting that beams me right into people's brains, and that's going to be the thing I chase. And this is just what's getting me into the vein and getting me a little bit of experience with it. I don't know. I just I know I felt so confident. I just really like what you said about having that moment where and it doesn't matter what anybody's going to say to you, that, hey, I'm going to give this a shot. I'm going to do this, and I'm going to do it like I want. I'm not going to listen to anybody. I shouldn't say I'm going to listen to people, but I'm not going to change. I'm not going to compromise my vision of what I can see for it. And if I just chase that, whether good, bad, or ugly, as long as I'm chasing that, I'm good. And I can be happy, and I can be solid with that. And I feel like that is something that everybody should be trying to find that one thing with them. And I'd be curious to ask you, if you could do anything, like if you had the world as your oyster, you had a magic wand, and you could live the life that you want to do, where would that passion bring you? And if you don't know, that is also fine, because I think that is a very tough thing to find. And sometimes it takes people their whole lives to find what that thing is. But I'm just curious if you have any inklings towards what that would be.
So sorry, are you asking me if I could wave a magic wand and change something about the world?
No, not really. Just for yourself. Like if you knew that there was some sort of path or profession or something that you could chase, and you knew that if you chased it with everything you had, you would find all the success that you wanted, right? Like say you want to be the prime minister, right? If being the prime minister was your goal, you knew you'd have success in that as long as you chased it with everything you had. What would that be? Like for me, it'd be podcasting, right? Like if I knew for sure, and I'm chasing it anyways, even not knowing that, but if I did know, that's what I would do, right? Like you could change my mind, and knowing that question, I wouldn't change it to being the president or something. I would still be doing this.
Can I give like
You can give whatever you want.
Yeah, because I genuinely believe that it takes out so much of life's excitement if you know you're
right.
like,
yeah.
I don't want to know.
Yeah,
I don't want.
That's good.
I don't really want to like. There's nothing I actually want to be. I just want to go through life and feel like I'm happy and I'm contributing and there's nothing, honestly, nothing that I want to be. I just want to be me.
That's great.
Be me every moment.
That is awesome. And I feel like, not to steal your amazing answer, but I feel like in a way that is what I'm trying to do too. And I feel like what I've seen of just what I love about podcasting is I've got to see, I was always told that you can't achieve that. That's impossible, right? That was always what I thought in my head of I can't be just my weirdo self, Nick, of like, I have all these different Nicks that I am to all these different people at work. I'm one, this, I'm with my friends, I'm this other. I could never let out that entirety of who I am with all the warts and all and how fucking weird I am. That'll never happen. And then I see these people that have a podcast or a stream or a YouTube channel where they just are unabashedly themselves. And people, there's 7 billion people in the world. There's going to be people that latch onto that. It might, you never know unless you try. That might be a couple thousand people, it might be a couple million people, right? You don't know. But as long as you try and you be authentic to yourself, the thought of ever being able to just support myself 100% on being myself authentically, whether that's through a podcast, whether that's through streaming, whether it's being something else, what I found, I had to be a very certain version of myself to have success with what I do with my day job. I have to be a certain person there 100%. I can't be who I want to be. I can't be who I am on the podcast, who I am at work. It just doesn't work, right? And I'm trying my best to bring those two worlds together and to try and be more my authentic self in everything, but it's just not what's best for the company at that point, right?
Yeah.
But to know that I'm working myself towards a future where I can be 100% myself 100% of the time, wear whatever I want, never have to wear a uniform again, and still be fully supported and financially successful and all these other things just based on who I am as a person. That's very exciting to me. And I feel like that is at the end goal of kind of the answer you gave. That is somewhat what I'm trying to do. I just find that podcasting is my medium of being able to do that. Do you know what I'm saying? I don't know if that made sense at all. But.
No, that made perfect sense. And I love how you said, this is kind of what I understood, is that you have to kind of hone in a lot of yourself in lots of other situations.
Mm-hmm.
And with podcasting, you see people who are really successful at it, and you don't see them holding back. You don't see them monitoring what they say or overthinking anything. They just are very free with who they are, and people accept them and love them and listen to them.
Yeah.
And that's kind of cool. Yeah, that's it. That's kind of cool.
Yeah. And then on top of that too, I get to see what all these podcasters and people like Jordan Peterson have given me and changed my life. And I just think, I feel like it's almost too cocky to say that I'll ever be able to do that, but I hope that one day I can do that same thing for other people. And I hope that I can, give back some of the amazing things that I've gotten through this medium. I can give back to other people. And then that's also like selfishly, I get to be who I am and all this stuff. And then on top of that, I get to help people. And that's a cool idea. And I feel like, I've just started this, but I've already gotten messages from people just saying like, hey, I really enjoyed this episode where you talk about mental health or something. Like I really appreciate, and that goes so far, that makes all this worth it, right? Like I'm not making any money on the podcast or anything at this point. Like that's not really one of the goals I've been doing with it. And eventually that is something I want to get into, but all the headache that goes into editing and putting all these things up and scheduling and lining things up and giving up weekends and afternoons after work to record them and all that stuff, it's all worth it when somebody messages, say, hey, I really needed that one. And I really appreciate that. Like that goes a long way. And I feel like I had heard people like Jordan Peterson talk about the emails and the people coming up to him in the street, and that seemed like a cool idea, but you just never think that could be me. And I was almost surprised. I thought that was something that might come 5 years into the podcast, 10 years into the podcast, once I had kind of figured out what I was doing and had something to say, because at the start I didn't know if I had anything to say, but I figured I'd figure it out and I would get better at it. And maybe eventually down the road, when I was a couple hundred episodes in, once I had some practice, I'd be able to do that. And to see that, right off the bat, I was already, helping one or two people in very small ways. That's huge. And that feels so cool. And it's hard to explain to people what that piece is. And, what I find about this podcast too, is it's almost amazing me in so many different ways, how I didn't even see coming ways that I'm enjoying this. Like I knew I would enjoy it in some ways, but then there's all these little gifts that are added onto it of things I didn't even know I'd get out of this experience, and reconnecting with certain people and bringing people out of the woodwork that I never thought, people I thought didn't even know I existed or wouldn't even give me the time of day, probably didn't even like me that much.
Thing on this, I heard something so cool about this.
For sure.
So they said, so how does it go? It's like when you're here, you have kind of this, you look around yourself and you have a kind of an amount of things that an amount of things, opportunities that come to you.
Yeah.
And sometimes you need to take one step forward for your whole horizons to change, for the opportunities to change, for so much that you don't see before you take the step. And I think that's exactly what you're pointing to.
Yes.
Right? It's like I took the step and now I saw I was in a whole new arena. I entered a different room, and then I'll take another step and I'll enter another. So you can't possibly imagine what might happen before you've taken the step. And I just love that idea, and it's so true for every step of my life.
Right. And I think it also goes back to a lot of Peterson's work as well, because I think what he talks about is that idea of, if you orient yourself in a way and you set your goals, your values, mindset, all these things right, and then work your ass off, because that is a huge piece of this, right? Like regardless of all this other stuff, you need to work your ass off, because that's what's going to move you from the next step, and just set your goal and work towards it. And then I think he actually talks about it in the rule called setting your aim or whatever it was, but just setting your aim at a target. And as you get closer, you can always aim better, right? Or once you get to that target, you can aim better at this next one, and you can along the way, and it brings you. And I actually, I've had a girl on the podcast a couple of times, went to university with her, and in university, she was talking about how she always wanted to work at the UN, and that was her goal. And she was an amazing person and had such a fire that I didn't question it for a second. If she told me I'm going to work with the UN one day, hell yeah, you are, girl. You are going to crush that shit, right? Like you just don't even want to get in this girl's way. She's awesome. Still is. But now, so she graduated in Alberta, same university as me, and then went over to Belgium and did her after degree in a similar vein, kind of seeing that, and started working for different jobs in that kind of domain, and found that wasn't what she wanted. And that she found this whole new lane where she now works for this chemical lobbying thing in the EU, and is just making these huge, like kicking exactly the kind of ass she said she was going to kick, but in this new domain. But she said if she wouldn't have never chased that path like a banshee, like just did everything she could driving forward with that goal in mind, she never would have got in there saying, ooh, this isn't really for me, but there's this other thing that I never even had heard of before and wouldn't have ever gotten even close to if I wasn't chasing this dream with everything I had. It opened up that door, and now she's so happy doing all these things and finding all these new domains and opening these doors. It's such a cool idea, and it's just this thing. It's forward momentum. It cannot be overstated with the importance that it has, regardless of how sure you are of what you want to do. As long as you're moving forward with everything you have and giving each day, if you're cleaning toilets at your job, if you got to clean those toilets the best you can, because that's what's going to open the doors to the next thing, right? You might get a promotion, that you go to some meeting that puts you in touch with this other person and this other business altogether, because you had worked hard to get to that place. It's going to open up this next door. And it's so important just to keep moving with everything you have, and to put everything you have into the day, and not be lazy, not be not settle for what's easy and what's put in front of you. And I feel like that is almost in a nutshell, all the rules put together is kind of that, of just set yourself and work really hard. And that's what's going to open up all these other things. And there's definitely other rules that'll help you along the way, but you're so right. That momentum will do you more good than any planning, any, schooling you could do schooling could be that forward momentum, but you got to be giving it everything you can. If you just are hoping that something's going to come across your desk or come across your life and change your life, it's not going to come until you go start seeking it out. It'll meet you halfway, but you've got to be the person that goes out and asks for it and puts it out in the world that you want it and you're ready for it. And then the world will deliver. It seems at least that way. It has so far for me. I can't speak for anybody else. I shouldn't say that, but for myself, that's the way it seems to be shaken out. And it seems like there's a lot of smart people that say the same thing.
Yeah.
Yeah. Oh man. So I got to ask you before we get too close to the end here. How did you find Jordan Peterson and how did you find the Peterson Pals group? Because that's kind of what brought us together for us to have this conversation today. And I'm just curious because for me, like I mentioned, Jordan Peterson, he grew up, an hour down the road from me right now, like Fairview, Alberta. It's not even an hour from me. And, was in Toronto when he first, busted onto the scene and had the world take notice of him. But it felt like, oh, that was in Canada. I'm hearing on my local news, right, about this Jordan Peterson guy. And it still seems amazing to me that how global his impact is. And I'm just curious where, thousands of miles away you heard about him.
Yeah. So it was just my brother. He said, there's this great book, 12 Rules for Life. Why don't you go and read it? And I did. And I kind of read, it's funny because the first time he gave it to me, I just read all the rules. I read like the contents page.
Yeah.
I just read all the rules. I'm like, oh yeah, this is cool. I got this. I don't need to read the book. Like, I got these rules. I know what they mean. But then kind of a few months later, or could have even been a year later, I did kind of read the whole thing, and the way, the clarity and the understanding and the kind of wisdom and goodness that comes out of that book is really unmatched. I think there's so much in there. And that's how I kind of became a fan, I guess.
Yeah.
But I'm not like I don't think everything he says is gospel. I'm not like a crazy, not that it's crazy to be that way, but I don't kind of,
I know what you're saying.
God, but but I do really appreciate that he speaks so close to the truth. And if he's saying things that don't make sense to me, I usually always question myself before I decide that, what he's saying that actually doesn't make sense. And then in terms of the Peterson Pals group, I was following Michaela Peterson on Instagram. I think this is how most people got there.
Me too. Yeah.
Put it on her story, and I thought I'd love to get involved in. I'm so glad I did. The just the quality of people that are on there. It's just you have such a bunch of smart, funny, kind, and really, if anyone's listening and they're not on, get on. Yeah, it's great.
It is. It really is.
Really great.
Yeah.
And that's my answer for you. Yeah.
Oh, I gotcha. And that's interesting because one of the first experiences I had reading 12 rules. Well, I think I got 12 rules for people knew that I enjoyed Jordan Peterson, right? Just on the podcast circuit, he was kind of doing. I think this is even before I listened to him on his own podcast, but just at times I would just hear him when he would go on Joe Rogan or he'd go on any of these other guys, Theo Vaughn. I would just always, eat it up because I really liked what he had to say. So somebody got me the book and sat at the house and I did the same thing. I read the headers for the rules. And I found that was probably the biggest disservice I could do for myself because I read those rules. Oh yeah, these rules all make sense, right? Like, and I went on my day, probably left that book for 2 or 3 years. And I just read it a couple months ago when I actually joined that Peterson Pals group. I was like, I think I know Jordan because I'd seen all this lecture series, all the other stuff, but just the one last thing was his books. I hadn't read them. I had just read the headings of the rules. And it was the fact that I had ordered his second book and it was supposed to be like 2 months away. And then it ended up getting delivered almost like a week after release. I was like, oh shit, I haven't even caught up on the first book. So I dive into it and I was so amazed by how much more rich those rules are. If you read the headers of what those rules are, you're probably almost better off. You're probably almost worse off than not reading it at all, because I feel like it gives you such an idea that you think you know what those rules are until you read them. Like the header of the rule is like an iceberg. Right? It's the tip. What he packs into those chapters about the rule and go on tangents about it to really give you the full scope of why that rule impacts and what he means by that rule. And I feel like that was something that I didn't realize, and can see why people, if you've read his books, you know what an intellect he is. And I feel like anybody that goes after him with these cheap attacks and all these things, you can tell you've never read his books, because if you had, you would not be speaking this way. And it's easy to listen to a couple 5-minute clips on him speaking that are, picked and choose over thousands of hours of his work, and to think of him one way. But you cannot, I would challenge anybody to read that book and bring those arguments forth of these types of art. Because I think there's, like you say, I'm not a Peterson maximalist either. I have some issues with some things that I feel okay having those issues because I've really studied him greatly. And I feel like if I was able to have a chat with him, he'd probably agree with me on half of these things and say, yeah, I'd probably have a couple, blind spots there. But it just seems like it'd be impossible for people to make these weak arguments, these strongman arguments against him that they are, if they had read his books, because I just think they're so well done and there's so much there, and has helped so many people. And you can see, when I was reading them, I feel like the experience I had was, I wish I would have read this years ago, because I feel like throughout all these other series, I had maybe not articulated as well as it was written in this book, but I felt, I see all these things. But as I'm reading, I'm just thinking of all my friends and all these people growing up that went down bad paths. And I was like, oh man, this is going to help so many people, so many kids like me, that if you would have given me this book at 16, it would have changed my life. And I've talked to so many people that book has changed their life. And I don't know. I don't.
Can I speak to one?
Of course you can. That's what we're here for.
Because I want to speak to that exact point, because I feel like so many people say this, where they say, I wish I would have read this earlier, I wish would have been different. But I just want to say one thing, which is that sometimes you're only ready to take in a lesson when you get to that point that you're ready to take in a lesson. So chances are, had you picked up that book at 16 years old, you would have read it and been like, this is bullshit. Like that is give it to a 16-year-old, you probably will get that response.
Yeah, you're
I just want to say
right.
It's not about the book, it's about where you're at. It's not about what it says, it's about what resonates with you.
Yes.
And it's like that book resonates with so many people in so many different ways, because everyone has their own life and their own struggles and their own things that they're dealing with, and they pick out the bits that speak to them.
Yeah.
So it's not really to do with the book, it's really to do with how kind of you are and where you're at. And right. To throw that in there.
I think you're very right. And I think that's what speaks to the power of the book itself, is how, and I think this is one of Jordan Peterson's core tenets, is the power of narrative and the power of storytelling, and how evolutionarily that has came with us from the time we learned to speak to the time we are now, is those narratives, and how much of our knowledge has been passed through those narratives, and how things only sink in. And when he writes a book with that knowledge that he already has, he writes the book through that lens, so that it's designed almost to pull people in on wherever they are in life. If you're a couple of steps down the road, or if you're almost at the end of the road, regardless on where you are in your life, that book can meet you where you are, because it is so tied to the fundamental aspects of who we are as people. It is so to the bedrock that almost anybody, regardless of where they are along the path, can find those people and pull things out of it, like you said, and find things that are important to them. And yes, you have to be ready for it, because I think people aren't even. I think sometimes people aren't ready for the realities of the world, and that's what that book is. In a nutshell, to me, is it's the realities of the world boiled down and codified for you, so that you're still going to fall in some of those pitfalls, but at least we're going to document them all for you. These are most of the major pitfalls you can fall into. Now it's up to you, right? You can write it off and go fall in them yourselves, like lots of people will have to do, and I'm sure have after reading them. But maybe one or two of those pitfalls you can start to recognize in yourself, because now you've seen them pointed out to you, and you can avoid, sidestep around a couple of those, and it helps you in your life. But I just feel like it's so applicable. And I think that speaks to the power, and to the power of him to recognize that and be able to write in that essence. But also I feel like there's a lot of people that recognize the power, the power in using the narratives that have been a part of us for so long and stumbling upon that truth. That's one thing. You can know that, you can understand. I understand that, but I couldn't write that book. For him to have to, that is years and years of knowledge, and going into the depths of the darkness of humanity, and the highest peaks and achievement of humanity, to get to that point where you understand those truths, to that point where you can articulate it like he did. I feel like the knowledge base that being able to write that book shows, and just shows who he is as a person, is so impressive to me, because that is deep knowledge that he has gained, and not gained in an easy way, right? There's some dark place. He had to do some research on some atrocities and horrors of the world to get that understanding. And so many people think they understand the world, but they've sheltered themselves away from a whole, 50% of it. It's wild. But to see somebody like him go through all that and go through that pain and those dark points, and takes all that knowledge that he did on that journey, comes back, puts it into a book like that, and brings it out to the world. I just think that is a higher achievement. Is hard for me to point to in the moment. Like, I'm sure I could, if I really tried to think of some things, I'm sure I could, but in this moment, like, that is just such a noble task and such a admirable goal. And it's already helped so many people, and is going to help so many people in the future, that I just, I can't speak enough. I know it sounds like I'm just this crazy Jordan Peterson head, which I swear I never was for a long time, but he, I don't know. I just think people need to give him more of a chance. And I feel like people are going to wake up in a couple of years and have said a lot of things about him that they didn't mean and didn't realize. And then they're going to say, holy shit, we were wrong. And we need to really recognize who he is. I think we're going to appreciate him much more when he's gone than he is being appreciated right now. And that's not to say he's not being appreciated, because clearly there's a whole Facebook group of people talking about the Lobster King, but you know what I'm saying?
Yeah. I think people who would dismiss him out of hand, rather than like, oh, they're wrong, or like, I just think shame. Like, there's so much to be gained. Ooh, my voice is going.
Well, I've kept you pretty long.
That's when the water was handy. That you said at the beginning. No, but it's like, it's just a missed opportunity. You can look at people and be like, oh, they're talking rubbish. They associate with a certain type of people. There's nothing to learn here. Mm-hmm. But no one cares. I mean, like, I don't care if you don't like Jordan Peterson.
Yeah.
But it's like, you're missing out on something that might be useful to you. It might help. It can't hurt.
Yeah.
It might help. It can't hurt. And that's kind of the way I approach things. It's like, something like this might help and it can't hurt, basically.
Right. And I agree. And I feel like that is a very powerful way to move through the world of just bringing things that might help but can't hurt. And then I feel like every once in a while you stumble upon things that say, if you come in with the right mindset, I almost guarantee, like, I'd say it might help. I almost guarantee it'll help. Like, I feel like there's very few things you can point to that are that level of, if you read this, I defy you to not get something out of this. Right. And that's where it's not going to hurt you for sure. And there's like a 99% chance you're going to get something out of this. So that's why I feel passionate standing behind it, where usually with 99% of things, I'm like, try it out if you want, don't if you don't. Like, I love giving recommendations of people taking it, a movie or something like that. But there's certain things like him, like Lex Friedman's podcast, like certain things where it's like, I'm so confident in the level of what you could get from this that I feel okay really waxing poetic about trying to get people into it, because the payoffs are so worth it and so there, that I don't feel the shame of normal thing. Like, I don't want to go and shamelessly plug for a 10-minute span about, I don't know, like I'm trying to think of something less useful, but like, I don't know, like sports or something like that. It's just one of those things where there's some great things there. If you want to take it, if it's for you, go for it. But if not, just leave it. And that's fine too. I just think it's almost, I feel duty bound, understanding what's within those books, to not do everything I can to help people see that for themselves and give it a chance and try it out. That's kind of what I'm thinking.
I think that's human nature. I think any healthy kind of, healthy person, the minute they find something that's helpful for them, the minute they find something that changed their lives, the first thing they want to do is just give it to everyone else. Yeah. Because we care about human suffering, and we care about people struggling, and we're just like, no, here, take this helped me, this might help you. Yeah.
Which is a great instinct and really is a point for the team good guys that, humanity is good at the core. That is one of those instincts that really points towards it. Yeah. When something really helps you, you want to tell people, you want everybody to experience it. Right. And you're not saying, only the people in my tribe should read this book because they're good. No, I want everybody, left, right, middle, center, left, everybody should read this because it's good information, and it's not any sort of type. It's so that's one of the things that's so unfortunate to me, that Jordan Peterson has been pigeonholed into this right-wing guy when none of his work, like when you read those books, there's nothing to do with left or right. It is human nature. It's evolutionary. It's the basis of who we are. It's religion. It's humanity. It's all these things. It's so much beyond these petty games of right and left that it's not even, it seems like when they try to pull him down from where he is and where he's operating into this level of these petty games, that's when shit goes sideways. But it's like, you can't even, if you're trying to even understand him through that lens of these petty games of left and right, you're doing yourself a disservice and you're not actually understanding what his work. You need to go beyond that and put all that aside for a couple hours at a time and really take in what he's trying to say. And I feel like that is, I feel like people are, it's kind of one of those right side of history, wrong side of history things I think we're going to start to see. I feel like we haven't even seen the start of what the impact guys like him and many others that are in the same vein are having. And I think 10 years, 15, 20 down the road, we're going to see people coming up that are that 16-year-old kid that's lost, that finds these teachings and really gets them on the path and helps them. And then what they bring to the world, 20 years down the line when they're writing their books, it all feeds off itself. And I feel like it's a very bold claim for people to say and dismiss some of these things offhand when they don't even realize what side of history that's going to put them on down the road. And that's exciting for me, just selfishly. We'll see how it is. We're on the right team, I think. Anything? I've already kept you here quite a long time, and I know you got to enjoy the rest of your Sunday night there, and I got a couple things to do. Anything that we didn't touch on that we wanted to, that we missed? I was going to maybe ask a couple of my ignorant Canadian Brexit questions. I didn't have time, but I'm sure I'll have to get you back on there. We talked lots of Peterson, the Royals a little bit, limitations, luck versus faith, fighting fire with fire. I think we covered it all. Anything that we missed?
No.
Well,
good load.
Awesome. Well, thank you so much for coming on. That was a really fun conversation. You really forced me to evaluate some of the positions I was in and really find those little bit pieces of nuance, things I say all the time that I've really been missing. And I feel like that is a gift that you can, now I get to take into every other podcast. And when I bring up these points that you've helped me sharpen, now that I get to take a piece of you forward into all the other ones and help spread these ideas. And I can't thank you enough for that. So thank you for coming on.
Thank you.
Awesome. Talk to you soon.
All right. Bye-bye.
All right. I hope you guys enjoyed that episode. Like I enjoyed recording it. Like I say every week, I hope it doesn't sound too shitty that I say similar things every week, but I mean it every week. I enjoy recording these so much, and I feel like that's always the message I want to get across to you guys in these intros and outros, just that I really enjoyed the episode and really enjoyed recording it. And then that's kind of the piece that I'm hoping comes through to you guys. And I almost shouldn't even say it, because if I'm enjoying it as much as I say I am, that should come through naturally to you guys. And I probably could find some better words to do. But hey, that's what I'm here for, just to get better and figure these things out. And then next week's outro will probably be better. Could be worse. Who knows? I don't know. We'll find out. What do I got on the go? All the social medias, follow those. That helps. YouTube channel, follow that. Subscribe to that. Leave the likes, leave the comments, all those fun things. Tell a friend. If you have guest ideas, send them my way. If you got just topic ideas, send them my way. If there's any current events that you haven't heard me mention that you'd like to hear my take on, send those my way. It always helps. If you yourself want to start a podcast, please reach out to me. I would love to help other people get started on their podcast journey as well. And I think that might be it. Other than that, if any other way you want to help with the podcast, always looking for hands, always looking for extra people that want to get involved. So other than that, I hope you guys have a great week. I might, like I said in the intro, I might see you again on another episode this week. We'll see how it goes, see how busy I am. But it's the first week of year 2 of the VonDubCast, and I might even try and get 3 episodes out this week. So we'll see. Don't hold me to it if I don't. I don't know. It might be a bit of a busy week here with work and everything else. So, all right, I will either see you on Friday or I will see you on Monday. Bye, guys.